All right, friends. This is Striking Gold, The Boil 2. Interviews with top Dwarven pilots and brewers. In this case, we are talking about Epitaph and Sunglasses, Chad and Julian, respectively.
Hey,
Yo.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for showing off the Dwarf to many, many people at probably the most important tournament of the year. Or
thanks
say,
for having us.
yeah, of
Yeah, of
course.
course.
So, and congratulations for your top finishes.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
So, um, I want to talk about deck differences before we start. I'm going to go ahead and
hmm
stream this to you guys. All right, let me know when you can see it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I can see the stream.
All right, so I've went ahead and done the heavy lifting so we don't have to like watch me piddle around. I've already
Hmm.
compared y'all's decks together and cut out the um, the difference cards. Um, we're just going to assume that if they, I do also compare them to the Magdanomicon, but that'll be later. So I want to talk about some very specific cards here. Let's start with Julian because he's on the left. That makes my brain. Makes it easier for my brain.
Sure.
There's some cards that are curious to me right now. Is um, engineer. What's the word on engineer right now?
So I've cut Cursed Mirror,
Yeah.
which is a card that was paired with Engineer for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, of course, without Dockside, Cursed Mirror lost a lot of value. Um, Engineer I found to be just like a decent middle of the road card where you see it in your opening hand, and depending on the matchup that you're in, it can either get an artifact dwarf or a stacks piece.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt that that was just good enough to warrant a slot. That's pretty much about it for reasons why I played it.
I mean, it effectively takes a tutor off of Magda for 2 mana. That's slightly worse than Gamble, but slightly better than
Hmm.
practically everything else.
So this is like actually thinking about engineer in this context because I did talk with Sunglasses the night that he won similarly about this card. Is that Drew and I have also, or a bunch of people and I have talked about potentially adding more vehicles to the deck for more consistency. And Goblin Engineer, while it doesn't enter as a vehicle, it's still a vehicle within X amount of time.
hmm
And usually that's good enough. And in the matchups where you absolutely need that Graph Digger's Cage, if you're running it, or you need a Winter Moon or any other potential stacks piece that your deck is running, um, in order to control the matchup, then that is available to you. So, like Drew said, it's basically just a better gamble for the things that are most important to us outside of roaming throne.
So I guess that behooves us to ask: is this card more or less filling the Imperial recruiter slot in the deck for those purposes? Except it also gets vehicles in addition to your Robo Dwarves and stacks pieces, right? It gets basically 3 of 4 relevant card types in your card like slots in the deck.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly good way to put it. It has just more utility than Imperial Recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also, like, I guess I'll mention, I don't think these come up super often, but there are instances where the ability to like switch 2 cards between your grave and the battlefield is relevant outside of just the initial card you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are times where our stacks pieces become, game losing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they stop our opponents, which are now our teammates, from using interaction to stop a winning player, things along the lines of that.
Right.
Um, they also, like, later on, if you have important uh, artifacts die, like your artifact dwarf or whatever dies, you if you draw a useless chrome mox or mox diamond or whatever it is later in the game, this now becomes a good artifact from your graveyard that died earlier. Um, So it has some long-term game plan applications.
No, that makes sense. That's definitely a aspect of the card we've thought about over time.
I definitely like hearing that. It's gonna make me consider putting it back in my deck.
So I guess how did it feel over the tournament?
I only saw it in game once,
Okay.
and it was fairly good. I mean, it ended up just being tutoring for an artifact dwarf,
Sure.
which ended up winning me the game over the course of a turn. But the one of the key things was I knew there was removal in hand at the table, so I was able to keep this artifact dwarf in the back pocket for several turns before I was able to bring it out and win.
Because the benefit is that as long as you have red mana and an artifact, it's a card you can always respond to the.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's
So I was
also
able
not
to
a
go on
card that
top of
most
it.
people are going to remove because they see that it's in the graveyard. They know that you're capable of getting it back, but like removing an engineer, unless it's like getting a Grafdigger's Cage or something specifically to stop them, they're just like, okay, well, this artifact dwarf's coming back eventually. We just have to be prepared for it, and then you
But
just find the window.
Right, and unless they kill it on the first turn, now you have the gun pointed at them, and there's nothing they can do.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Other curious cards.
Can I ask about one?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that you have Nexus of Becoming in your deck, and I toyed with that myself a long time, and I want to know how it worked for you.
So unfortunately, I did not see this card this tournament. I have seen it many times in games, like within the past couple months, which is why I brought it. I don't think it's like the most amazing card in the world. Like, if CEDH was 90 card singleton, it probably wouldn't be in the deck.
Sure.
Right.
But it was good enough, and my prediction for the meta was that it was going to be really grindy, and in those grindy games, people are going to have infinite counterspells in hand. So if you ever get stuck with something like Clock in Hand or like non-creature artifact dwarves, or just like relevant pieces, like it would be a fantastic grind engine against those, and has some inevitability to it. But yeah, I didn't see it in the boil.
Yeah,
This
those
is a
were all
card
the
that we
reasons I
talked about
almost.
the other day as well. And to sort of layer into it, he's not on Spine of Bishop. So
Yeah, I am not.
we can cover that in a second as far as like why Chad's on it maybe.
Yeah.
But when you get off of Spine is usually the thing that you can go, hey, when I'm going to politic for keeping an activation, Spine stops XYZ.
Yep.
You cannot get your opponents to be like, I'm cool with a Grafdigger's Cage unless it's going to stop, a specific thing. They're not going to be cool with a Portal to Phyrexia. They're not going to be cool with a God Pharaoh statue in most situations. Especially if it's an early tutor. So like, if you aren't able to be like, hey, I'm going to hold this up specifically to interact on the next turn cycle to stop a win, you have to have something to go, hey, I'm going to go get this thing that's not the One Ring, because when you go, I'm going to go get the One Ring, you put yourself in an awkward position, because if they play an early Bowmaster, you're just out of the game. You can never activate that. And even though the One Ring is a necessary evil card, you can't not run it because the card draw is so strong. But at the same time, you also can't overvalue it, because in response to anything after your first draw, you can just wipe your own board, which is not something that you want to put yourself in the position of if you can help it. So Nexus of Becoming becomes that card where you can go, I'm gonna go and get this big doofy thing. It's gonna draw me one card per turn. It may give me, some board presence that I don't have to cast stuff. But there's very few things in our deck that the opponents are actively going to be like, I want to counter that thing anyway, especially if you're off of a lot of stacks pieces like Julian is in this particular instance. Um, it it really becomes easier for you to be like, hey, I'm gonna go get this for my first thing. Um, and it's taking a target off of your back as long as you can communicate that properly.
Yep. I mean that's exactly why Spine is in my deck. It is a political tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a couple more cards that I want to go poke at. This is probably the best event that I've seen for your Forks and Co. How did they perform for you?
Ooh. I think my forks performed. They. I had a couple games where they were like, okay, but for most of those games, they sat in the hand for a really long time. Um, it's tough. With no dockside, it's harder to just copy a tutor and win the game.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The
I don't.
ceiling's lower, right?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't hate them. But they are non-creature spells, and I think the main issue I have with them is that there's a lot of blowout potential. You know,
The 2-for-1.
people tend not to counter a demonic tutor. They'll just copy the card, or they'll just counter the card that the person gets. Um, but if you fork a demonic tutor, that demonic tutor getting countered, the chances of that go up, 1,000,000%. So I'm not sure if they're worth the risk anymore. They performed okay for me in the event. But I don't have a lot of confidence in them compared to how I did in the previous meta.
I'll say that up until this event, I had both of those in my deck as well.
I think I would agree. I think that's basically we probably had the same break point. A couple weeks after the banning, we were just like, yeah, no, probably time to retire these. Um, How about Final Fortune?
So I unfortunately did not see that card.
Okay. Or fortunately,
uh,
possibly, because it's a game loser.
yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, I think in the situations where it resolves, like you're casting it in a situation where it resolving wins you the game. I think the card is fairly strong. But again, I didn't see it, so I can't really speak too much to it.
Okay.
But yeah.
Can I talk a little bit about the forks in the current meta, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
So right now, the forks primarily would copy those things like Demonic Tutor. But the other most important thing is the prevalence of Eldritch Evolution, specifically for Timna going to get Seedborn Muse. So the fact that this one card exists, the situation where you're forking it means that your opponents are likely going to stop it. And realistically, if Eldritch Evolution is not going to get countered to begin with, and they're going to go get their Seedborn Muse, forking it is always going to get us Roaming Throne, which puts us basically at a 1-turn clock.
Yep.
And while a 1-turn clock for us is very good, the opponents still need to deal with, turn order. So if you're after them immediately, they don't get a chance to really do anything with their Seedborn Muse outside of maybe get, one activation, or they might be able to hold up a little bit of extra potential interaction, right?
Yeah.
But a majority of the things that are interacting with us aren't interacting with the other opponents at the table to begin with. As far as like removal goes for specific win cons outside of some other creature specific wins. And stuff like Neoform doesn't do that. So if the high end is Eldritch Evolution Demonic Tutor, in the low end is Finale of Devastation X equals 2, Neoform, etc. You're really stuck between those cards only being good in maybe 30% of your games that you're in a pod against like the decks that are using these cards in this manner. Um, you might see Neoforming Timna into the new Flash Fairy going forward, but like that will hit the CMC4 for us to go get Rumming Throne. But outside of these sort of things getting creatures that we can get, some of the green decks in the format also only get green creatures as part of the resolution, and that doesn't do anything for us,
Right.
like Green Sun Zenith. So if you're stuck in this situation where you're realistically only getting value out of maybe 10 sorceries and otherwise they function as like a second copy of Force of Will on the stack, like that's not usually where we want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's why they're not in my deck anymore.
So if you're already not in the mindset of I'm keeping these for interaction and I'm just holding them for the best of the best thing to either force them to get countered by our opponents or to get a copy of something, like if the best of the best is only Finale X equals 4 or higher, Eldritch Evolution on specific creatures that will hit Roaming Throne or Demonic Tutor or, Vampiric Tutor, etc., etc. There are other options, obviously. But um, you also have to think about the play pattern of when those cards get played. Um, Vampiric Tutor is almost always on turn 1. Not always, but almost always on turn 1, turn 2. And when you're thinking about anything that's played in that sort of a manner, like we don't have the go and grab our um, mana crypt off of Enlightened Tutor anymore. So even if that sort of play pattern existed, having 2 red mana to fork it or reverberate it or whatever, it just doesn't exist at that time frame in the game usually. We're usually looking to do something else with our mana to go forward with our own game plan. And I think that the only time that fork and stuff ends up becoming worthwhile is like turn 3 to turn 5 for those very specific cards that will potentially win us the game. But if they don't happen, they're pseudo dead cards.
Yeah, I was about to say the ceiling I've seen with the fort cards is ad nos. Rogside put it on the stack. Everybody fights over it, and just after you realize it's going to get countered, you come in and copy it.
That can go bad for you too sometimes.
Oh,
But,
absolutely.
Oh my god.
Always. No, everybody wants to counter an ad nos, but that's why I always pass on it and let the blue players fight for it. And then once I've found out, oh, it's going to get countered by these guys, then I try and
Even in
copy it.
even
even
copying it yourself, you don't usually get enough value out of it.
to win.
Now you got to be you have to be very conservative when you do get it off. Just go for a few cards because honestly, there's a lot of stuff you don't want in your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've died of spine before. I think one of my losses at my last tournament I played in, I forked the ad nos and it didn't go super.
Didn't go very well.
No, I went hard because because the other 2 players were F6 and I was like, well, I gotta find I gotta dig for Tybalt's trickery.
I would say the couple of times I did it, I can't remember going more than like 5-6 cards deep.
Yeah. So one last card I wanted to talk about because I think the rest of them are pretty reasonable. How have you liked Fury relative to really anything else? Just how have you liked it?
So I mean, like this, like the main reason I considered Fury was it's a creature spell,
Sure.
removal, so it's like a little bit more resilient, right? Because like there's something like an Oppo in play and you have to kill it. Everybody, like if you try to remove it and people have a counter spell for that removal, they're most likely going to counter it because of how scary the Magda is once the Oppo leaves the board. You've probably been hoarding treasures underneath it. It's usually like the removal is usually a game-winning play. So my thought process was I just wanted my removal to be as resilient as possible. And I mean, like we can look at Chad's like difference between our decks. Like clearly, there's like a better card right there, Sudden Shock. My copy didn't come in the mail in time.
Okay.
Ah,
Well, there you go.
So yeah, like I'll explain like some more of this in like the prep for the tournament discussion part.
Sure. Yeah, we'll definitely
But
get
yeah,
there.
there's quite a few card differences here that the main reason why there is a difference is because I just didn't have the better card.
Availability. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
There are a couple cards that aren't because of that reason, because we did talk about that the other night,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
I know a little bit about what he's getting at. So I'm going to bring up the cards that aren't part of that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Chiscoria.
No, that is
It is?
I
I thought it wasn't. I thought you
so-
were getting on your soapbox about it a little bit.
Well, it was like comparing it to like Cavern Horde Dragon.
Okay.
Like between the two, I think like Cavern Horde Dragon feels uncastable,
Sure.
whereas Chiscoria is at least a castable card most of the time. I still don't think it's like great. I think it's probably
Chiss has
bad.
affinity, right? Affinity for
Yeah,
artifacts,
affinity,
and
yeah.
then the other one is it's for your opponent that has the most artifacts, right?
yeah.
I want to say about Chiss is that while I like the card because I'm based in Dragon Pilled, I do think it's one of those quadrant theory cards where you have to really think about when it's doing the work for you. And for me, Chiss is like at best, or it's at its best at parity or when you're ahead because you have developed enough artifacts for it to be, fairly cheap, and that's good and all. Whereas I think Cavern Horde is worst when you haven't developed, like in the development quadrant, and is not fantastic while you're ahead because you may not have opponents who've developed as well as you would have liked, so that thing becomes cheap. But when you're behind, like you've gotten blown out, it's a very good recovery tool, and much like in the way that we call the Ancient Copper Dragon the one card that can take you from a 0% chance to a higher than 0% chance single search. Cavern Horde kind of lives in that nice middle ground where if you are slightly behind and there's an opponent that is even remotely invested in their rocks, you can generate a significant amount of comeback value or just get a win off of it. And I don't think Chiscoria really has as many strong points. It also Cavern Horde never bricks you, and Chiscoria absolutely can.
I think it's pretty rare for the Chiscoria to brick you per se. Like even in the like quote unquote nightmare scenario where you like exile clock, then even if it gets countered, you can always get it back with your bark form.
Well, the problem with that, specifically talking about that, is that it's still based on your affinity for artifacts, what you can cast, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in those situations where early game you are trying to get Chiss out, like when you have enough treasures to enable her, and then like do the whole shenanigans where you can pay the cost with the affinity and then, or lock in the cost with affinity and then use the treasures to play them, you end up putting yourself in a situation where that no longer is castable in some very consistent scenarios. And the argument would be, well, just don't play the card when that happens. But if you're not deploying it, then you're kind of risking losing value as well.
Sure. I mean, I think it's pretty rare for you to cast a Chiscoria, attack with it, and exile something meaningful that you can't just then cast for free. I mean, we're talking about like at least in my deck, Nexus, and then I guess, Godpharaoh statue and Portal.
Mm-hmm.
If your affinity is less than 4,
Or
I think that's like really, really rare. I never cast Chiss when my affinity was less than 5. I only cast it once this tournament.
How'd it do for you?
It didn't do. There was a known swords in hand.
Oh dear.
So I cast it and said I wouldn't attack with it, and passed the turn. And it died to something. I forget what.
Okay.
and then Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and the last game that Chad was in is reason to potentially run this card.
Yeah. So I guess I'll talk more about my experience with the boil with this card slightly later on.
Okay.
But yeah, my thought process was Bowmasters is like enemy number 1, I guess, tied with like Oppo.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this card just it did enough. Like, it doesn't. I'll quote Leo here, one of my friends, also Magda player, who was at the boil. Like, it doesn't do anything amazing, but it does a couple things just good enough to where I think it justifies its slot. Graveyard Hate is relevant in, I think, most games of CEDH.
Mm-hmm.
Even only exiling 1 card is often pretty relevant. And the fact that you can get your dwarves out of Bowmaster's range is fantastic. And there are devoted druids floating around nowadays, which are yeah. If you exile a devoted druid, it turns out that makes you a lot of treasures. Yeah, I think the card's. I don't think the card's like broken or anything, but I think it has earned a slot in my deck for now.
I could see myself replacing my Academy manufacturer with it.
Yeah, I
All
can
right.
see that.
Let's move over to you because I want to talk about. I mean, honestly, your deck is not incredibly different from ours. Before the stream, we talked about the wisdom of fetch lands and how potentially you are goozling yourself by giving your opponent's oppo a way to both stop your normal searching, but also stop you from getting your red sources so that you can burn the oppo, and that is spooky. I think you'd probably already agree with us that had happened to you at the boil, so I'm assuming it hadn't.
No. I never got a land taken from me.
Well, that's good. I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Memjar.
And Lion's Eye.
No, I love those cards. It's my favorite loop.
Okay, talks about the loop. How does the loop work, and why do you think it's relevant in the modern era?
I don't know if I'd say it's relevant. It's kind of like a little nostalgia factor for me from when I first started playing Magda. It was like I just thought it was an extremely interesting line. I liked being able to look through all my cards, and just go over top of people. So just the line, you sack the memory jar with it on the stack. You crack the LED, use the Elixir of Immortality, shuffle it back in your deck, tutor them all out with it still on the stack, draw your 7 cards, and then just keep repeating.
Yep.
And anybody tries to stop you, you just go over them.
Yep, do it again.
In my previous version of the deck, I had other tech for the other ways to use the LED. I really enjoy, especially with the bark form, I really enjoy being able to put cards from my hand into the graveyard and then get them back in my library. But beforehand, I had actually had an interesting thing. I was back when I was running, I believe it's Goblin Welder is the one that doesn't have the CMC restriction.
Yes.
I had a game where I top decked my clock. I already had a Universal Automaton out, and I was politicking, and I played an LED, and I was like, look, guys, I'm not going to attack. I'm going to hold it open. just pass the turn. I was in a pretty good position, and they let me do it. And then later on in the game, later on in that turn cycle, somebody went for a win and just with their stuff on the stack, I cracked my LED, discarded my hand, activated the Goblin Welder to bring the clock back, and then went on over top of them, which that sold LED for me even harder right then. That was a long time ago though.
Right. And the question
So-
is, do we need that to do those type of maneuvers on top?
I don't think so anymore. I don't
Right.
think because we have things like the armor. That's another outlet I use for getting cards in a graveyard.
Mhm.
But there's a
any
special
lines
place in
with
my
that.
heart for the LED memory jar and elixir of immortality loop.
Hey, I was trying to make
You-
Goldspan work for a long time. So pet cards are pet cards.
Mm-hmm.
Pet,
Yep.
pet cards are pet cards, but like, if you think that they're not potentially worth having in the deck, they're just sort of like there because you like them. What are things that
Well,
like?
memory jar stops thosses.
Sure.
Anybody who's worth their salt is not gonna try and thosses when you got 5 treasures up.
Right.
Even if you have a torpor orb, they're not going to do that.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
we have other options, which is kind of the main thing. So the only reason why a memory jar loop, which you don't even really necessarily need elixir of immortality for because of bark
Nope.
form harvester.
Yep. Arcform made that
Um,
not necessary.
The memory jar does solve the problem of winning through the One Ring, which may be a problem in some scenarios for versions of the deck that moving forward may not be on God Pharaoh statue, which
Mhm.
is something we'll talk
Yeah.
about later.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. But I would also say that I kind of want the blue farm of the Rogsai player to exist after the attempt because they probably
So,
have counter spells, right?
speaking of stuff like protection, do you guys really find yourselves having trouble winning on that? Because I feel like you just kill the other player's past turn as soon as the protection wears off. You just do whatever you were doing and kill him.
It's a magical Christmas land sort of situation where you're 25% chance to be the last thing in the pod.
Mhm.
It realistically never matters.
Yeah.
Right.
But
It's less important than deck thinging.
yes, it's sure.
You guys are really
but-
on me for me about that.
Fetch lands, man. I'm shaking my finger at you. But talking about protection specifically, there is one card in Sunglasses list in Lightning Greaves.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this card in the past.
God.
The server has, and we've hated this card because for a long time, or at least many variants of the deck, aren't on as many artifact dwarves, and you can't do the liquid metal torque lines safely with Lightning Greaves. But with Bowmaster being as prevalent as it is, and 80% of the removal in the format seemingly being bounce spells,
Yep.
Greaves does protect against that.
Yep. Well, the way I see Greaves is it just lets you swing your Magda into a blocker 1 turn quicker.
I also look at Greaves as the Rogsai win con on turn 3 that everyone is now reacting to because now they can't remove Magda if they don't like Magda has such an inevitability that but not for removing Magda in response to the equip. You are just seeding the game eventually. You are just going to lose that game eventually, and therefore it won't happen if they have the opportunity to do it. And I feel like having better Magda agnostic treasure generation is preferable to fourth net inflection point at the time at which you want, control player A and mid range player C shooting their shot at, or holding up their interaction for the Rogsai or the other turbo-y player.
The unfortunate reality, though, is that outside of like Cavern Horde Dragon and Ragavan, and you'll see that the big score is in his deck, but he'll talk about that later. That there aren't a lot of Magda agnostic treasure generation in
Not good
our
ones.
deck. No. And realistically, we are a commander-centric deck. It's always going to be that way, unless Wizards decides that they want to print something insane. I mean, we got Season of the Bold, which is like 5 tapped treasures for 5 mana, but that's getting countered all day anyway. So, like, I don't know what to tell you, bud.
No, it's valid. It's a I mean, it's very much a make them have it moment.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
let's. I want to push on to just talk
Yeah.
about uh, the next couple of slides, which are just going to be the decks individually versus the Magdanomicon, which um, isn't going to be much different than the
Yeah.
than what we were talking about. Volatile falls in there, but like I don't think there's much to say there other than
Mhm.
that it's a good card that ends up being the 12th of, or I guess like 13th.
The
Uh,
one surprising thing to me,
yeah,
specifically for Julian's list,
yeah.
is they are not on Cormbox, and they are on Mopal, but they're not on Great Furnace.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, Great Furnace is a card that should be in my deck.
Okay,
Um,
that's fine.
but
Yes.
like
Yes.
again, there's maybe like 15 cards that should be in my deck that I just didn't have.
Okay,
Okay.
Like cards I would have liked to have played, like other than the already mentioned like Sudden Shock, etc. Um, I I would have liked to have Rite of Flame in the deck. Um, I would have liked to have gosh, what is that enchantment called?
spiteful.
Yeah, Spiteful Banditry. I
Banditry.
think would have been
Hmm.
amazing at this tournament.
Why do you think it would have been amazing?
There's just so many creatures. There's just a lot of creatures, and Magda is off the board a lot of the time. It also is a card that just gets better the more removal is in your deck, and I
Yeah.
think going up on removal is correct. I think like cards in my, so there's, like I said, there's a lot of cards I don't think are very good that are in my deck, but the cards that are unique that I will like get up on a pedestal for, I think mainly the number one is J Will. I think that card is broken
Okay.
and should be in every red deck.
You want to
And I
expand upon that?
Did we take it out?
yeah,
I mean, it's not in the Magdanomicon list, but it's in your list and my list, Drew.
Right,
So
right, right. Okay,
okay.
sorry, I was confusing. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, we took it out of the we haven't updated the Magdanomicon because
I
we have to
see.
test. So we're
Okay.
yeah,
probably
I
like
Yeah.
three
I'm
or four
not
cards past this.
comfortable. Yeah, I'm not comfortable putting things that I want people to play that are getting into the deck or whatever, like that
Sure,
I haven't
sure.
tested enough.
Yep.
So
Yeah, so I think the card, like Magda does have a reasonably high number of cards that clog the hand. Like you end up with like a few 3 drops sometimes. Um so even if this card hits 3 lands, a lot of times the mana produced by it is just so relevant because it lets you uh dump your hand in a single turn rather than it taking 2 or 3 turns to do so.
Hmm.
Um, but it also very often draws into just something relevant. Like even if it's just an extra 1 drop dwarf, that's often, game changing.
or a bolt for their Thrasios that you just
Y-
happen to have extra mana for now.
Right.
sure, exactly,
There's
right? Like
nothing wrong with the incidental burn spell that you just get to cast for free, effectively.
yeah,
Yep.
so like I think one of the big issues with Magda in this meta is you don't have good card draw, whereas every other deck does for the most part. So getting some extra cards, like you're gonna average like 2 non-land cards or so,
Mhm.
every time you cast it, and even if they're like the 2 most mid cards you can think of, you're gonna get them for free, and that's often enough to push Magda over the edge.
Yep.
Um,
Let's say I cut
yeah.
this card because when Mana Crypt went away, because I always felt like it was most useful in those first few turns when you're itching to get all those 1 and 2 drops out of your hand, and if you could just turn one of Jessica's Will, cash it out.
Turn
I
two
always
Justice
felt
Will
like
is still very popular. Is still very possible, and there's a
very
lot
very
of
much
hands,
so.
especially if you're on Chrome Mox, where you have Chrome Mox, you have Mox Diamond, you still have Mox Amber in some, not Amber, Mox Opal in some situations,
Mhm.
where you just get to go, okay, well, I have Great Furnace, I have this 0 drop, and then I have a 1 drop that enables Mopal to play something else. Next turn, Jessica's will have enough mana to, even if it's only for 7 mana or something, it's still okay. Play Magda for 2, and
Mhm.
now I have 5 mana that I get to use from the rest of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
It kind of mimics the dumb J-Lo mana crypt hand, like
Yep.
turn 1 stupid stuff,
Mhm.
where everyone goes, "Oh, you got 2 dwarfs and a stacks piece. Thanks, great."
I
Game
will
2.
say that we are probably on the higher end of the spectrum as to the decks that J Will gets countered versus just letting it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just from my personal experience.
If they're countering your
I've
mana instead of what you're
yeah.
casting, what are they doing?
I mean, I had like for in this event, I did cast the only J Will I cast. I literally just revealed my hand and I was like, hey, look, this is just a bunch of like random crappy creatures.
Right.
And they let it resolve, and I dumped all my random crappy creatures and won the game because they were like dwarves and a vehicle.
Well, that was dumb of them.
I was gonna say they
Yeah.
let you just put
Yeah.
dwarves out. What?
yeah, they were just like, oh, they're like, oh,
It's
look,
just
this
another
is a
2
vanilla
1-drop
creature.
dwarves. Like, what the
It's a
fuck?
little cute. It's just some cute little
Yeah.
1/1s. Let them have them.
There's
They're
little
good.
guys.
Yeah, exactly.
We can
So
block them.
Guys with irrelevant text that might as well be flavor text.
Hey,
Yep.
I
Hey,
say that every
Spark Mage is
time.
broken.
I say every time my cards don't have text on them, and every time I get them with something stupid.
What's funny is ever since the new Magda, all those things that seemed irrelevant, it's like, oh, now these are crimes.
Yeah, now everything's
Yeah,
a fucking,
Now these
no,
are crimes. They're good.
now everything's a volatile fault. GG.
Yep.
All right, so I think we've kind of talked about your list to the extent that it needs to
Yeah,
be.
I
Let's pop over to Chad's right here, and Chad's
Oh
is
wow,
pretty
we are very similar.
right. And aside from the bad cards, your deck looks great.
You know,
These
I
bad
mean,
cards got me to the final table.
I know, right? And look
the
at
the
I can't say anything against it. I mean, the one card I like here is Stoke the Flames. I've been less like negative on that card especially now.
I will
I'm more
say,
good.
the longer I've had it in my deck, the less it's been impactful. I've had a few times where it's made a big difference and really helped, but like I don't
so
think it's made the impact
it,
you think it would on paper.
we'll talk about a couple cards later that may be worth putting in your deck moving forward.
Mhm.
Um, where so that yeah, but outside of Stoke the Flames, it's mostly just stuff that we don't consider very good, but it's uh especially on decks that need to have a backup line, and like you're on Elixir, right? But like
Yep.
a lot of other decks, um, their backup line uses their MDFC. So
Right.
like if you play your MDFC and you're specifically not on Spine of Isha, you need Chaos Warp to put it back in your deck.
Mhm.
But the Magdanomicon is on Spine of Isha still, but it's neither here nor there.
Yeah, if you go off
Um,
spine, you need Chaos Warp, but also Fomori Vault, dude. It's
Fomori
I,
Vault,
I want
especially
Fomori
with
Vault. One of my lands is actually a replacement because I could not find my Fomori Vault.
okay.
It was the actually it's one of the fetch lands. I was previously only running 2 of them, or
You
maybe I
only
was running
you
1.
only need a certain amount of deck thinning, is what I'm hearing. You don't want too much.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to jam everyone. Like I don't have a Scalding Tarn in there or anything like that. Who would want that card in their deck? Gross.
Yeah, I don't want to spend $70. But yeah, I mean, realistically, okay. So one card I mean, we've talked about the kind of like quadrant theory on Cavern Horde working. It can just be
Mhm.
a big load of crap in your hand. But Flywheel.
I literally got it in the mail today. It's
Okay.
sitting in my backpack right now.
Okay.
You're
Cool.
like, okay, that sounds good.
All right.
So
It is
one
in
card that
my
is
backpack right now.
one card that is in neither of your decks that is probably still very good in this meta is Delayed Blast Fireball. So
I've got it, but I didn't slot it in, and I thought about it.
Do you
Maybe I should
regret not
have.
slotting it in?
No, I don't think there was ever a moment where it came up that it would have been
Okay.
good.
Yeah,
So my read on the situation right now is that X2 is just not quite enough. You need the 3. There's too many Thrasios that are just going to limp through the situation, and you're going to be like, yeah, I kind of put the Thrasios ahead or something like that. That they're
That
like,
and I can't tutor it.
well,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd rather just go get Portal. I mean, obviously, we'd all rather go get Portal, but it just the fact when you've got access to that tool, I hate cards that don't work unless I just draw them.
sure. I
I
mean,
would try and that's a lot of them, but I would try and remove that as much as I can.
right.
So
You'd rather
you're
eliminate entire categories of cards versus having only a couple of like low volume, like high impact cards you can't tutor.
Mm-hmm.
That fair. I generally agree with that.
Now, don't get me wrong. Blade Blast Fireball is a great card. I've definitely ran it before. Just I don't think I've got. I think I would probably even slot like Blasphemous Act in before that.
sure, but like with how prevalent Timna, Thrasios, and Cannon are, while Portal to Phyrexia is very strong against those decks, not having to use Portal to Phyrexia while still removing all of their dorks is still
Yeah.
it's a little magical Christmas land, right? But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, like it's still only 3 mana.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's definitely one of those things that eats a counter,
Mm-hmm.
which is good or bad depending on how you approach those situations.
Oh, I don't like fishing counters out of people's hands. I like those staying there.
That's what I mean is that so a card that Sunglasses isn't on is Blood Moon.
Yeah.
So
But context, I
Yep.
am on Magus.
right, but the way that you described it to me was that the reason why you're not on Blood Moon is because it just goes eat target counterspell.
Yeah. Too many times I've gone like, hey, what do you guys think about this? Are you just going to counter this if I cast it? Right? And they, show me their force of negation or, whatever it is that's in their hand. And I don't want to just spend 3 mana, waste my turn and remove a counter spell that doesn't really affect me but stops me from losing the game to some other player. But I do like Magus in that, yeah, you just jam that card and it loses to like Force of Will, and that's it most of the time.
And it completely fucks over half the decks in the format because even the 2 color decks, unless they're specifically teching against Magda,
Don't have
are
basic
on
lands
like
most
2
of the
basic
time.
lands, 2 to
Yeah.
4.
I
So
will say,
like
Blood Moon won my semifinal game.
Nice.
I mean,
Yeah.
to me, it's like gamble, right? 2/3 of the time, or whatever the odds are, right? Three
you get
fourths of the
countered.
time, 2/3 of the time, it comes down. Um, you just win the game, and you don't, or you're so far ahead that it didn't matter that 1/3 of the time you ate a counter that would have stopped Rogside next turn. You take those odds.
I think the benefit of slamming it now in this current meta with Dockside being gone is too good. I think its stocks went way up with Dockside getting banned because previously
sure.
I'd say playing a Blood Moon was I just play it and then we play slowly and the first person to top deck a Dockside usually wins.
Or the first person with the black mana
Yeah.
wins, and that's the frustrating part. You'd lose to you'd lose someone vamp tutoring in response, and then no one else can do anything.
Yep.
All right, so I want to pop into like the actual questions. So, what prep did you do for the tournament? Let's start with Julian.
Yeah, so I came with a group of people from the Bay Area. A lot of them are Rogside players. Mainly friends Alex and Derek. Derek also top 16 at this event, playing Rogside. And basically, we talked a lot just about the reality of stacks versus Rogsai, and I came to the conclusion that I just don't need to play them. and I just need to point fingers at Roxai, which led me to taking around 10 cards out of the deck and shoving in random crap in their place, which were selected from a pile of cards that Leo had that were designated as the cards too bad to go in his list.
Okay.
which is why my deck looks so weird.
Why the big score exists.
Yes, it's why like the big score is in the deck. It's why I had Lightning Greaves in the deck, right? Whether or not some of those cards ended up being like okay, is besides the point. They were just like not ideal.
You
but
built
yeah,
built the deck in the old school way, whatever you had on hand.
Yeah, for the most part. In my local meta, the percentage of Rogsai players is really high. Like for example, I think like 2 silver events in a row, 30% of players were playing Rogsai.
Yeah.
Gross.
So I was looking at a lot of double Rogsai pods, and those are unwinnable unless you drop a early stacks piece. You just cannot win them. But in this metagame, if you're seeing a Rogsai, the likelihood is that's the only Rogsai, and the matchup is way easier. You can just point fingers at them, and as long as there's a blue player at the table, chances are you're fine, and you don't need to, dump a Trinisphere on board.
That's interesting. That makes sense.
Yeah, I like that last point because I felt the same way. I didn't like think it preemptively, but as I was playing, every time I got a Rogsai in my pot, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! All the heat's off me."
Yes. Yep.
And,
exactly.
And that way, you're not having to develop stacks pieces like Vexing Bauble that only shut off the person trying to win with a bunch of, looping free cards. Yep. So, do you think cards? Show was talking about this the other day. Do you guys think like Vexing Bauble's stock has gone down outside of like the draw loop?
I hadn't really thought about it, if I'm being honest. I still have it in my deck. I figure it's still useful enough.
I don't think it's a bad card in the deck. It lost some equity in
It
that.
lost a lot of equity.
Yeah, there's no mana crypt anymore or anything.
Jeweled Lotus, I think, was technically a
J-Lo.
little bit more important than Mana Crypt, but the fact that like Mana Crypt, J-Lo both in an opening hand, like that's just not something you're stopping anymore. The best case scenario is like, oh cool, I stopped their Mox Diamond and their Lotus Petal. Like, and sure, that's good, but like, I don't know. It can be a defense grid of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main reason I really like this card is the information side of things. So, like for example, let's say there is a turbo player at the table, and I have a Vexing Bauble in my like opening hand. I can show this card to the blue players, right? That aren't the turbo player, and I'm like, hey, how do you feel about this? And either like if they say yeah, totally fine with that, play it. I already know that like they almost certainly don't have Force of Will or Force of Negation or MBT in their hand. Or the opposite is they slide me a card back and I see that they have a Force of Will or a Force of Negation or an MBT in their hand. And that information is like incredibly relevant later on in the game.
And
because you just know what to play around.
And all you lost was the first turn play that the knowledge on the first turn play you were already going to make, and they really can't play around.
Yes, yeah, and like the card replaces itself. It also like, I mean, you can have the card in play, and it can just stop a Force of Will from countering your roaming throne or something, right? Yep. Like when you have a Vexing Bauble in play, your creature's getting countered like the percent chance of that happening drops by like 70%. Because there's just no force of will.
Yeah.
There's it's mainly that people will eventually want you to remove the vexing bauble, and the way that they're going to convince you is by showing you the free spells in their hand.
Yeah. It's actually really fair. It's something like, because you have options, you have leverage, and because you have leverage, you can get information.
Yeah. So I think that's where most of the card's equity comes from, and like how I play around the card.
No, that's good.
And I think you have to play around the card for it to be worth a spot in the deck.
Yeah, utilize all the leverage you can. So I'll move that question back over to Chad. What prep did you do for the tournament?
I took this Rogside deck I was playing and I threw it in the trash. And then I decided I was gonna rebuild my Magda deck because it's the deck I started with when I got into CEDH. It's the deck I know the best, and I figured if I'm going to a large event like the Boil 2 with very minimal, reps in the previous month, that I might as well play a deck I know. So I threw this back together. I am pretty sure that a lot of my list came from Rust for this one, which is probably why it's so similar to the Magdanomicon.
Yeah.
But not for the... through this.
Oh, God.
Do what? No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, but not for the new hotness that me, Show, and and Rust and a couple of others are like trying independently. We kind of follow the same like movement between like the Staxy mid range to like the tempo mid range like flow.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up being very similar.
Yeah. So really, honestly, it's not a great answer, but I didn't do a lot of prep at all in the previous month. I just played all the previous year.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes that's the best way to go about it. Just jam.
So you just kind of threw this together. So that kind of the second question is kind of redundant for you because you just made the deck. You put the deck back together.
Well, I mean, I've always had the deck list on Moxfield.
Right. So I guess the question, aside from like what you were looking at from Rust's list, was there anything that like stood out to you, before the tournament, or like, I need to put this in the list, I need to remove this. This is not going to show. This is not going to show up positively, etc. and so forth.
All the goblin package and the I had the apple in there still. There's a few cards I had in there that was just like, I don't need these. I feel like I don't like them. I, funnily enough, was not running the Battered Golem for a long time. And that was one that I probably put in maybe a month or two before this tournament.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And Sunglasses, Julian, we've definitely already talked about the pile of bad Leo cards that you decided to add in, and the and would it be correct to characterize your changes were to specifically reduce your investment in targeting Rogsai and increase your ability to handle the Simic menace that you were sure to face?
Yes. So it was essentially just, what are the best versus mid-range cards I can grab to replace all these random stacks pieces that were intended for the Rogsai matchup.
Right.
Yeah, pretty much exactly. So I just picked the Chiscoria and Cavern Horde. I was just like, all right, well, like, I'd rather draw this than Trinisphere. So,
Sure.
Like, it's not great, but I'd rather have it in my hand than these other cards. And that was pretty much my thought process. It was mainly like 10 cards that were better than stacks.
Did you see a lot of the decks that you thought you were going to in the tournament?
I don't know if I had I mean, like, the deck I expected to see the most was TNT. I definitely saw a decent amount of it. But I also saw a lot of like random garbage. But it turns out that
Don't talk about
random
Luma like
garbage.
that.
Yeah, it turns
I'm right
out
here.
that random garbage dot deck ends up just being like worse TNT in that it like plays mana, dirtles, has a bunch of counter spells, and like tries to like Thoracle eventually or something.
Decks like that
But,
have
yeah.
Brewer's advantage, though. They'll hit you with things you're not even a little bit ready for.
That one dude that makes clones of things that you don't have in your graveyard or whatever. Not the Volo one, but the other one. Like
Orbar?
what?
Oh, never mind.
I can't remember his name. But
I don't even know what this card is.
it's from the D&D set. But like, there's some
Is it
wild.
John Orinicus?
Orinicus? Anyway, no, I'm just saying. Yeah, the green X like weird mid-range decks definitely just come out of left field and win with stupid combos you weren't prepared for.
Yeah.
I'll say I expected to see a lot of Kennen and TNT, and they were definitely all around. I honestly, I expected to see more Magda too. I truly think Magda is set in a good position right now.
The numbers agree.
Mhm.
I think we are, as an aside, I think we are in our Winota dip, as people like to call it. I think we are in the Winota dip, and I think hopefully Aether Drift gives us more tools to weather that storm and go back into hibernation in the mountain, come back out stronger, and have another 40% win rate.
I don't think Aether Drift is going to get us there. I don't think getting that 1-drop or 0-drop vehicle is going to be enough to push us over the edge that just doesn't make us kill on sight.
I'm just saying, there's probably a protective motorcycle that gives give crude creature Ward 2 or some stupid shit like that. they could do it. They're going to push the envelope on what it means to be a vehicle in this set, because Mario Kart's going to Mario Kart. So never
We'll
say
see.
never. But I do
R&D Dwarf, come
My
on.
hopes
yeah,
are up.
they're not in here right now, but maybe they'll listen.
Okay, yeah.
But what I'll say is that I definitely think that we are in our downturn. Like, we're probably going to be pretty close as bad as we're going to have been for like the last 3 months, because we have a lot of new players who are not very experienced, and they're going to be going to a lot of in-person tournaments and getting their ass kicked, because people are respecting the people that go like run the table, for lack of a better word. And
There's also a lot of people that keep saying that Magda's a good beginner CEDH deck.
That's a lie.
And
That's a total lie.
I
thanks,
don't
Lua.
agree
Don't
that
do that.
I don't agree that it's a good beginner CDH deck. I'll say that the primer that we have is probably one of the better ones to understand the deck itself. But there's still, you need so much experience in the actual CEDH metagame to know what to do sometimes
Yeah.
and what to tutor for and when, that like it's not easy.
You know what made me way better at Magda? It was deciding to randomly play a bunch of other decks.
Right.
For like a 3 or 4 month period. I went and played a lot of decks I had trouble against, got used to them, learned their weaknesses, and it made me much more knowledgeable about how to use Magda to get around those decks and to counter them.
So going into that, what do you think are the worst matchups that we currently have, or the worst matchups that you had in the tournament?
I think TNT's pretty hard, honestly. They got OBM and Oppo Agent, two of our biggest things that we don't want to deal with.
And Draenith, and it's back with a vengeance.
Yep.
Yeah. I do think TNT is probably like one of the problems is like not only does it have like Oppo and Bowmasters in the deck, but it's fine with going for like a grindy game plan. Like for example, like Rogsai, some of the Rogsai lists have Bowmasters in the deck, but it's not really something you need to be scared about, because the Rogsai isn't gonna go, oh no, Magda, let me like demonic tutor for this Bowmasters.
Right.
But the TNT player is going to go, yeah, let me demonic tutor for this Bowmasters.
Especially when they see another Thrasios player in the pod, they're like, draw every turn cycle? Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Magda in the ground.
So this is just an aside before you get into the rounds. What is the deck building shift we need to make those pain points a little less painful.
Well, I think things like anything that temporarily or permanently just buffs our toughness by 1 is just absolutely huge. So like honestly, Siege Smash, I used it to destroy like artifacts most of the time, but there was at least one point in this event where it saved my Magda from an OBM.
Yep.
And kept me around long enough to where I was able to get rid of it and continue on with my game plan. I don't think I ended up winning that one, but it definitely, I will say, there's already a lot of tools in our deck that make OBM harder for them to kill us with it.
I'm kind of the opinion that you can really only use Robo Dwarves or instant speed spells to counteract OBM.
Mm-hmm.
I think every other flavor of slot is just too bad in slot to be worth the investment or opportunity cost, I guess. Whereas cards like Siege Smash and I guess Stoke the Flames.
I would say Siege Smash.
Stoke the Flames. What's the burning? It's the one from Innistrad.
You're talking about the other split second when deal 2 damage?
No. It's a dual modal, but one of them is buff a creature.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I know the one you're talking about.
I will say it does hurt when I have to use Siege Smash just to buff Magda. It definitely hurts. It doesn't feel good.
Right, because it's the worst mode, right? It's like on Fury, it's like on Fury Charm removing a time counter. You're like, ooh, do I spend a mana and a card on that? But having having never dead options on a 3-mode or 2 or 3-mode spell, especially one with a split second.
Raise the effigy, but it's only attacking creatures.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, this is better than that. But yeah, let's. So, like, protection. Ways to get around OBM specifically. Do we need to speed bump them because they can outgrind us? Do you think like either flute to make Thrasios or Kinnan less of a entity, or better yet, just like removing their board with cards like Fury and Pyrokinesis and
Delayed Blast Fireball?
DBF, yeah. What do you
I
think?
mean, I think those are all great. Those are all great choices, and I do think we are gonna have to shift more to like we're gonna have to deal with more creatures.
Counter
for sure.
mid-range effectively.
Yeah, we're gonna have to deal with more creatures. Like we can do a lot, but we're not gonna do as much as a TNT with a Seedborn, and we're gonna need a way to get rid of that Seedborn pretty consistently.
Yeah.
I still think that because of the way that the format is currently, Godrak is such a strong card.
Oh, agreed. That dragon is the only dragon I kept in my deck. I've been trying to get rid of every dragon.
And now it's just like, do you trade with my dwarf with 1 toughness with your 2/2 Timna?
Yes.
You want to give two treasures, please?
My dragon's name is Zorn, actually. Yeah, I mean, unironically, I think if you're considering Spiteful, Gadrak is slightly better, and very hard to counter. But anyway, let's get into the round so we can work through that pretty quickly. Because I do have like a mid, like right before top cut discussion I want to have, and I don't want to keep us here until 10 o'clock.
Cool.
I don't mind being here till midnight.
I know.
I do. I work in the morning.
Damn.
So we're gonna move on to round 1.
Bye.
So let's talk about the buy.
Oh, sick! You got a buy.
Can I explain to you how I got that buy? Because
Yeah.
I was not happy with it, even though it's like good for me. It was not just me that this happened to. There was another player, and not only did we get put into buys, which is first off, that shouldn't have happened. There were pods that I believe, if I heard correctly, where the 4th player never showed up, and they were forced to play 3-man pods. So my thought is, I think whoever was running the event misclicked and dropped us after players meeting. It was me and another guy. I can't. I'm not gonna mention his name because I don't know if he wants to be on here, but
Sure.
He's from Nashville, and we as soon I was sitting at my table from my players meeting, and they said round 1's up, refresh. I was in a pod, and then like within less than a minute, they're like, hey, repaired, and I refresh again, and it says I've been dropped, and I'm just in my head, I'm freaking out. I'm like, what's going on? I run to the judge's table. start talking to them. One of the judges is telling me, you had to have not been in your chair. Like, anyways, got it all resolved because the judge who was checking my area was like, no, he's not on my list. Like, he shouldn't have been dropped. And same thing happened with this other guy, and they put us both back in the tournament, but did not repair. They just told us we were going to have a bye. I do not believe the third person who had a bye. I don't think he had this issue, but
So there
it
might have been an
felt
odd
weird.
person, and that person just got a
Hmm.
buy. But
Yep.
otherwise, you should have been repaired. They should have remade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe so. I know people have issues with that, but we hadn't been more than 2 minutes into people mulliganing when they put us back into the tournament.
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't happy about it because I would rather have the chance to play for it, especially if I don't think they do, but if a buy ever got to a point where it gave you a lower opponent win percentage, I would hate never having the opportunity to win the game myself.
Right. It's a win with an asterisk that doesn't help your tie breaks
Hmm.
in that case.
Yep.
All right. Well, top deck nonsense aside, let's talk about Julian's
Round one.
round one. So, how'd this one go for you? And was Lumra remotely an entity?
um, shockingly, Lumra was the second biggest threat at the table
Cool.
for a while out of all four. Um, mainly because they had like an LED hand,
Oh dear.
so it was like one of their faster starts. Um, basically the way this round went, I had like a decent uh I had like land, soul ring, damping sphere, um and pretty like simple like start. I only had Magda as my like only dwarf for the entire game. But I did have an Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And the Lumra ended up on turn 2 disruptor fluting me when I had 0 treasures. While there was a fish on board. So he drew TNT a card. And I sat under that disrupting flute for I think 5 turns. Just
I got a
building up
question for you.
treasure. Oh yeah.
Did you get Magda out before, and was he just stopping your activations, or did he get it out while she was still in the command zone?
I was ahead in turn cycle, so I was able to get Magda out before.
Okay.
Pretty luckily. So yeah, it was not like preemptive like I'm gonna delay your Magda from being cast for a while. It was just I
You're
don't know.
never gonna activate.
Yeah, they were convinced I was gonna somehow make 5 treasures on my next turn. With
That's
one
that's
dwarf
the
in
that's
play.
the crux
Yeah.
of Magda, man. Everybody thinks you're always about to win.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. I showed him my hand, and I was like, look, I am not going to, I tried my hardest because I just didn't want him to draw a TNT a card.
Right.
But he was like, no, I'm doing this. I was like, okay. And the TNT player just slams a devoted druid immediately afterwards. Luckily they didn't have like the mana to like also play Thrasios and their like the
King
one white
gods
vehicle
or
spell.
the-
Swift we can
Ah,
drink.
Swift.
With
Yeah.
configuration.
Yep.
And so it got back to my turn, and I was able to hold up a twin shot sniper. So I was able to kill the devoted druid and then exile it with my Agatha's Soul Cauldron when they went for the combo.
Nice.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So I sat under the flute, just building counters on Magda with Soul Cauldron for a few turn cycles, before eventually the TNT player was getting greedy, and on Lumra's end step, like taps out to do like Thrasios activations again, and then decides to cast activate Beseju, targeting my dampening sphere because they had a cradle out and they wanted to activate Thrasios even more.
Imagine that.
And I deswat it to the Disrupting Flute, and that was it.
Yep.
That was the game.
Yep.
Very good. So Akuma and Kazir did nothing.
Yeah, they played a Dothy Voidwalker. At one point, they did not use. So this was a thing. Like they I knew they were a new player.
Uh-huh.
So, and all the players in this pod were not. Like, I don't want to like disparage them, but they were not like really really good players.
Sure.
So
round one's
I
for.
de-swat, and they did not use the Voidwalker to de-swat back.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Which I was counting on. They like there was other good spells under the Voidwalker that they should have been using. So I knew that they had like kind of forgotten about this like piece of value that they had.
Right.
Which is why I went for it.
Mm.
And yeah, it ended up working out.
All right. GG.
Yeah.
On to round 2. So let's start with let's go to chat. So there's first actual game. You have 2 real decks and a you know what? I know you're wait, did Yuriko win this game?
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think I won this game.
Nope.
I was looking at the Scion. I was like, I'm pretty sure I lost this deck with the Scion of the Ur Dragon. In fact, there is something funny about this game. If you look at the players in it, all three of us were the people who had buys, and the guy who won it is the one person who did not have a buy.
That's funny. His tiebreaker just got worse.
Yeah. Yeah, that was unfortunate for him, right?
Anything special about how the Yuriko played out? I mean, obviously, you're in a pod with less creatures, so they had more free real estate.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember too much about the game. It was fairly boring. We ended up killing people. We died just from a flip of a Yuriko trigger. I was the last person dead. They flipped. And it wasn't even like they tutored it. They just flipped Shadow of Mortality when I had 8 life left.
That's
and
it. It is what it is.
That's it. That's it. Dead.
Was the Scion player Tyler?
No, the Scion player was Justin.
Okay.
All right. Well, sorry, I mislabeled.
I didn't know if Tyler went to the
If I remember correctly, the Roxai player was trying to go off very early and was just getting stalked by Scion and Yuriko. And Yuriko came out the gates with two creatures in the beginning, the very first turn, and was getting Yuriko triggers from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, were they utilizing flyers, or were they utilizing ninjas that just had extra value tacked onto them?
There was Ornithopter, and then there was one blue ninja. It was the one that lets him draw cards when it enters, if it enters attacking. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But there was an interesting point of interaction, and I knew he was going to do this, but it was my only way to try and save myself. It was the last attack he was going for at me, and I did something to kill his Yuriko, but then after it died, he just ninjutsu'd it in on the other creature.
It's such a wonderful thing.
It was just one of those things where I was like, I hope he doesn't know he can do this, but I'm just gonna kill Yuriko. It's my last chance.
Mm-hmm. It's a great interaction, and when you get somebody for the first time with it, you feel like a giga brain, and they're just like, "What? You can do that?" All right.
I want to say that I just got shut down in this game. I was not doing a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think Yuriko is a pretty good matchup against us because of all the free interaction and the fact that we don't want to lose our creatures and we can't speed bump very well.
Mm-hmm.
So that we become the mana, or we become the card draw outlet for Yuriko a lot of the time. They cannibalize us a little bit, which is not great because then they get even more free removal.
Actually, I now remember how we killed the Rogsai player so quickly. Yeah. I had a Dwarven Blood Boiler, a Magda the Horde Master, and another Dwarf, or a Magda, and nobody was ready for it, but Yuriko swung, and the one that they didn't block with after Yuriko did their ninjutsu nonsense, I started buffing them with my Blood Boiler. And yeah, I want to say we hit that in one turn. We hit the Rogsai for 12 damage.
That's
just
great.
because of that.
Well, hitting the Adnos deck with extra damage is usually good.
Yeah, always good.
All right, so back over to you, Julian. I see you had a
more meta pod.
I would say a meta pod, but also a very fast pod, a very selfish solitaire style pod. So what's going on there?
Yeah, so this is the classic, like, hey, T&K, this Rogsai is scary. That Anala is, like, also scary. And so the T&K kept only, like, non-creature interaction. Crazy. My opening hand, I don't remember too much of it, other than my, like, turn 1 being, like, the lovely clown car Simian Spirit Guide Magda
Nice.
turn 1, and just, like, I got my like, I definitely won this game because I was in a early seat and I had clown car. That was, like, the main takeaway. Like, I drew, like, a top 5 card in the deck and had a fantastic start, and nobody had any interaction for me at all, and I won the game on turn 3.
Let's be real.
Amazing.
Silas and Inala didn't have interaction for you in their deck. And
Yeah.
T&K,
Yeah.
T&K
Yeah,
were
no,
forced.
so the
Yeah,
the Anala gambled and looked through their deck and found 0 answers for me.
right.
Was John was the Anala player a guy named John?
I can
Beard,
chat.
bandana.
I don't remember exactly what he looked like, but let me just
Not
look
not not,
in
not important. Just a
Okay.
buddy.
I mean,
Gotcha,
just
I can just
generally,
look.
Anala's not there to.
Yeah.
Anala's
Yeah,
there to
he's
race
probably the
Magda.
only one.
Yeah. All right. So let's go to
His
round
name's
3.
Daniel.
Ah,
All right. So we have. I'm actually really interested to see if any of these decks mattered. In Chad, your game.
they did not.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Tyam did not even get cast. I want to say this one was one very. I started. I had like three dwarfs on the board before the second turn that were all tapping.
Yeah.
Oh.
This was just a clean, easy win. I can't remember all the specifics. I just know that I was not scared of any of these decks.
Yeah, Crick is not scary anymore. Tyam.
Crick mulled low too, very low.
He's got.
I want to
He's
say
got.
3.
He's got much worse mulls now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Tyam is a very feast or famine whether they get something out that's relevant to the entire table or just.
Trap Digger's
I,
Cage and
I want to say,
Deceptive Cape
yeah, I want to say
disable it.
Tyam slammed some sort of stacks that hurt everybody but me.
Oh, a rule
Like
of
a rule of law.
Yeah.
I think-
I can't remember what it was. I just remember being like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Like in my head, I'm just like, that's awesome.
And
Yeah, I've seen Tyam play, like, Aethersworn Canonist, and I'm like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh,
Yeah, Tyam.
Okay. This game was interesting. Let me tell you how far ahead I got. Tyam played an Archon of Emeria, and there was a point in the game where I had 2 Portal to Phyrexias, a God Pharaoh statue, and an Archon of Emeria on my board.
Oh my god.
And I was just playing this. I think Magda was my only dwarf. That's what this game was. Never mind. Yeah.
I just think Tyam's one of those decks that we cannibalize pretty well. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
it like stacks decks like they're like Highland. One's gonna feed the other generally, and
Yep.
it's not always us that wins that combo. I think Winota beats our ass, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But like Tyam is the one that we take their lunch money. Did Abaddon
Yep.
do anything, or did they just fail to like get there?
Because the Tyam slammed that Archon very early, and that just absolutely shut down Crick and Abaddon. That is the stacks piece I was mentioning. That I was like, okay, cool. I love that. Love
Yep.
to see it.
We
Yeah,
would
let
play
me go
that
get
in our
my
deck if we
portal.
could.
Like, yeah, if we could play some white cards, I'd totally have Archon of Emeria in the deck.
Yeah. So over to you, Julian. I see a pretty, I'm gonna say rough pod generally.
Yeah.
Talk to me about it.
So I kept, like, this was also on stream. I kept a pretty reasonable hand of, like, land, mana vault into I think I had an unlicensed hearse. So, like, the following turn I could go like unlicensed hearse, Magda, crew it,
Yeah.
and play a Zorn from my hand.
Not bad.
Amazing.
So that was the hand I kept. Kinnan goes land mana dork. Crom goes they had a gemstone. They play Cavern Naming Human and then play a Grand Abolisher on turn 1.
Yikes.
The other TNK player goes land soul. No, just land pass. Kinnan plays another land and then just casts a Bloom Tender. TNK draws. They go, don't worry guys, I'm not scary. Land, Timna, swing with Grand Abolisher, draw a card. And the card I draw for turn is a Magus of the Moon,
It's not bad.
which
That's
just
it.
basically
That's-
wins the game.
Yeah.
I cast the I do the same line of like land, use it in the mana vault to I cast the unlicensed source first, then I cast Magda, crew, treasure, Magus and Moon.
Yeah.
And at this point, both TNK players, like, you know, they're just out of the game.
Yeah.
The other TNK player, he makes like a really, really bad misplay, and in response to the Magus of the Moon, the fourth seat TNK, he enlightened tutors for a soul ring, which is really weird. I'm not sure why he didn't enlighten tutor for a color.
Anything that makes colors.
Yeah. So he gets the soul ring, draws it, goes land soul ring, complains about the Magus and not being able to cast anything, and then passes to Kinnan. And then Kinnan top decks Chrome Mox
Yeah.
and exiles the turtle.
That's
forget
exactly what I was going
called.
to say. I assumed it would be the blue-green guy, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's got
So-
fixins and it just sucks.
Yeah, so the thing is, I wouldn't have cast the Magus of the Moon if I had a read that Kinnan had a colored mana rock in hand.
It just
But
usually comes out
the-
before turn 3.
Yeah, so the way he played, there's just like no universe where he has, like, maybe he has a Mox Diamond in hand and not a land to pitch it to.
Right.
But it doesn't make sense the way he tapped and the way he like went
Yes.
about his turns.
Yeah.
He would have like Kinnan, like, because like if you have an Arcane Signet, for example, instead of casting Bloom Tender, he would cast Kinnan, tap the Elvish Mystic,
For blue.
play the
yeah.
Arcane Signet,
Yeah.
tap the Arcane Signet, play the Bloom Tender.
Yeah, no. He
so-
just, heart of the cards got him.
Yeah. So the Kinnan does that, fine, whatever. The second seed TNK player does nothing, comes back to me. I go land, I play my Zorn, make a couple treasures. Goes back to Kinnan. Kinnan just plays mana, activates, and flips into Nyx Bloom Ancient.
Yep.
Well,
And-
fun.
Yeah, and nothing really relevant else happened in the game. I was like, the TNK it gets to the TNK player's turn, and he tries to convince me to trade off the Magus of Moon with the Grand Abolisher by attacking me. And I asking him, like, what are you gonna do? Like, are you gonna get like a Toxic Deluge? Are you gonna get like something from this? Like, what are you gonna do? And he goes, I will tutor for a Cursed Totem. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's just me handing the game to one of the TNK players. I can't do that. And I'm like, do you have like anything else? Because like I would be fine with like a board reset or something at this point. But he's like, no. I'm like, can you just like show me your hand? And he's like, no, I won't show you my hand like at all. He won't give me like any information. So I
Wants to
refuse.
lose.
Yeah, and so I had like one turn before, so I draw for that turn. I don't hit like another dwarf, so I can only just get up to 4 treasures. If I hit a dwarf that turn,
You portal.
I
and
get
you
to
win. Yeah.
I get to portal and I win. It goes to Kinnan's turn again. he top decks Seedborn Muse,
Yeah.
and then flips into a clone on Nyxbloom Ancient,
Of
and then
course.
just starts flipping through his deck.
Yeah.
And
As you do.
even then, I still had one more live draw where if I draw an artifact dwarf, I'm fine.
Right.
Or even if I draw a regular dwarf, I'm fine because I have Sculpting Steel in my hand and I can double portal him.
Right.
As long as it's a cheap enough dwarf.
Right.
I think like if it was any of the 1-mana dwarves or an artifact dwarf, I win that game. I whiffed down that draw as well. And then I was ready to concede at that point. The TNK players made Kinnan play it out. But yeah, ended up losing. I was probably the baddest beats of the whole event, but
I mean, you didn't have much help from
yeah,
your
it
buddies.
was from seat 3 in like double TNK Kinnan, like I don't think I was likely to win that game anyway. So
Sure.
yeah. One last thing I was saying.
Sure.
I was really hard set on playing for a win. Like even though my odds were like pretty low, when the guy made the offer to trade with the Grand Abolisher, that is a point where you can offer the draw. And since I was 2-0, I was not interested in doing so.
Right.
But there are situations where that is a good position to offer a draw, and almost certainly it would have been a drawn game because Kinnan had like 0 cards in hand. Would have just lost.
It was just flips. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right. Chad, you lost to Rogthras in round 4.
I'm trying to remember this game. I want to say it was probably a fast one.
It looks like
I
it would
don't
be
even.
fast,
I don't
like
even
the
remember
fast
playing a
game.
Rog Thras. Now that I'm being
And
honest.
an Agila.
I do remember the Najila. I'm.
There's a TNT and a Gila and a Rogthras. If my Google or if my research was correct.
Yeah, I want to say this was shut down loss because I don't remember it at all. I think this is one of the games where I was kind of just like top decking everything.
Well, it'll be a quick round then.
Yeah, it was definitely a quick one. I want to say this is one where I went and got food afterwards.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right, so
that's
Julian
how
back.
it goes sometimes.
Actually, yes, it was because this was right before round 5, the last round of that. Yeah, I had left to go get food because
Okay.
this round was over super fast.
Sure. So Julian, TNT, you, Rogsai, and Kidden.
Oh wait, I think I told you this wrong. It was Kenrith, not TNT.
Kenrith in.
Yeah.
You know, we can fix this. We have the technology. Where's my Kenrith at? Where you at, homie? I know we have one in here.
Got him on here somewhere, right, Kenrith? Where you at?
I know someone played a Kenny. Maybe not. Maybe I.
Yeah, the one that you didn't put on there.
We can pretend. We can pretend it's a Kenrith.
So wait, which one is the Kenrith again?
The TNT.
The TNT
one.
Yeah.
So it's actually super relevant that it was a Kenrith.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Kenrith, then you, then Rogsai, then Ken. Okay.
I kept another turn 1 Damping Sphere hand.
Yeah.
This time it's not like a Land Soul Ring one. It was like a Simian Spirit Guide one.
Boom.
No, it was the TNT.
It was the TNT.
The Rog
TNT.
Right.
Control Z. Control Z.
Yeah, I definitely did that. Now he's big.
The Kenrith absolutely dumps his hand. It was something ridiculous. I don't remember exactly the artifacts, but it was like land, Soul Ring into like an Arcane Signet, also plays an LED, and then also plays a Dork off of the Signet.
Okay.
So he just like dumps his hand, and I just go like measly like The also important, the Kinnin mold low. Kinnin mold a 4, I think.
Not great.
So if the Kenrith hadn't dumped his hand and the Kinnin hadn't mold low, I probably would have turned 2'd the Damping Sphere, and I would have like just turned 1 Magda. But there's basically 0 interaction for this Rogsai, so I decided to turn 1 the Damping Sphere.
Sure.
Which did put the Rogsai like a bit in his tracks. So the game gets slowed down a bit. The Kinnin just goes like land Soul Ring. Either the Rogsai player just goes land and Rograk.
Right.
Kenrith draws for turn, does nothing, and passes to me. And I was just able to play out just like another, like I played out. I just turned 2 Magda, and passed. Rogsai Vampiric Tutors, gets something, plays a land, plays a Springleaf Drum, passes. Kinnin goes draw for turn, doesn't play a land, and then just goes turn 2 Rhystic Study. It's like, cool, fine. In response to the Rhystic Study, the Rogsai player also had he played a Mana Vault turn 1, I think, or something. I don't know. He had a lot of mana for some reason. I forget what it was, but he just jams an Adnaz and goes down really low. No, was this? No, it wasn't on this turn cycle. Sorry, that happens the next turn cycle because the Kenrith player plays his Kenrith, and I play a vehicle. And then the Rogsai player like draws for turn, plays a Mana Vault. That's it. On turn 3, he plays a Mana Vault, passes to Kinnin. Kinnin casts Kinnin, passes to Kenrith, and that's when the Rogsai player Adnazes. And he goes low. I think he went to 11 life, which is not crazy low, right?
No.
He goes only to 11. But at this point, he's tapped out except for like 1 land. And he doesn't draw like any removal or anything, of course, right? The Kenrith player, still on Kinnin's end step, dings us all for 2 with the Deathrite Shaman.
That's
untaps, gives Kenrith trample, smacks Rogsai, passes to me, gives all my creatures trample with Kenrith because that works, and I just kill Rogsai with my attack.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so Rogsai played it safe with his Naz and still just died.
Well, that's what happens when you do it to the like ultimate control toolboxy commander, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I thought that it was pretty hilarious.
Did they find it funny?
They were not upset about it.
Okay.
They did, however, which I thought this was like kind of, because I was like, he was like, hey, I was like, I guess I'm gonna die, but let me see what I could do. And I was like, hey, just like, don't king make anyone or something. Like, if you're just gonna die, just like, you know, don't hurt anyone.
Ooh.
And he basically is like, he was like, yeah, okay. He like acknowledged what I said, and then he pyroblasts Kinnin's Rhystic Study. And I was like, oh, okay. Kinnin's like, really, dude? And he's like, yeah. He's like, can I draw off it? And Rogsai's like, well, yeah. And he draws, and the Kinnin draws Mental Misstep and counters the Pyroblast.
That's
hilarious. So it ended up being net neutral.
Oh my god.
So
Which is
if you're
super funny.
So I want to talk about that because that's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I don't look at games as like individual games. I look at games as strings of things that lead you to a dub on the tournament, and you're always improving your record in whatever way you can. That's within the realm of like ethics and tournament rules is totally fine and valid. I think
Yep.
you know, making the board unlivable as you die, so where that draws more likely, is not king making. It is actively increasing your likelihood of having a better point record for the game. So I
Playing
think
to an out.
Sure. I think it's, at least in that situation though, I think pyroblasting the Kinnan is less likely for a draw.
ooh, so if Kinnan's the, I mean, yeah, I guess that's fair, because if Kinnan can't deal with you, you're gonna win.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah,
did
so-
Julian,
but
you
anyway,
started
that-
this tournament off 4-0.
No, I lost round 3.
Okay, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
Either way,
yeah, I
three,
lost to
three,
Kinnan.
3-1 is still insanely good.
Yeah.
You tore it up in Swiss, didn't you?
I think I'm a good Swiss player. I think my politics work well in Swiss. But they didn't work well here in a moment where Kenrith intuitions and basically like tries to make like a breach pile. But his graveyard is like really small, and he does like a really weird intuition because he wants to like get rid of this damping sphere. But basically we give him Brain Freeze in hand and Savine's Wreck and the Force of Vigor in grave. And it gets to his turn and he goes to cast the breach, and I'm like, hey, don't do that. It's not going to work. And I show him Pyroblast and Flare of Duplication.
Ooh.
And I'm like, you're not going to get through my damping sphere. If you try to Force of Vigor it, I'm going to use this, referencing the flare, and I'm going to kill your breach. And even if you have a counterspell, there's only one card in his hand left. Like, even if that's a counterspell, I have this for it. There's no universe where your breach gets through, right? All that's going to happen is we will both end up drawing Kinnan like a total of like 4 or 5 cards or something.
Right.
And then we'll both lose the game. He goes, no, I don't care. Casts Breach, and then tries to cast the Force of Vigor from grave when there's only 2 other cards in it.
Oh.
And he goes, huh. He goes like, what, I guess, whatever. And then he's like, he LEDs for blue, pitching the Brain Freeze. Brain freezes himself for 6 cards, hits like nothing. And at this point, the LED is going to cost 2 mana to play from grave, so it only nets 1 because of the damping sphere. He replays the LED, cracks it for green, and then like taps out completely, including like the Deathrite Shaman, to Force the Vigor, the Rhystic Study, and the damping sphere. And that was like his turn, and he lets the breach die.
Oh.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I was like, great. I mean, like next turn he does still have a win next turn because he has Savine's in grave. He can Savine's back, like breach LED, and there isn't a damping sphere in play anymore.
Right.
Right.
So like I don't think it was like terrible, but considering like what I have in my
Wait, you have
hand,
Flare of
he should-
Duplication. You can
Yeah.
just... Buddy.
Yeah.
Wait, don't
It
you
was
get
never
your
working
wait?
that
Don't
turn.
you get your Magda back? If you cast it from graveyard, you get the damping sphere and then copy it to get the Magda back that you
Yeah,
sacked.
yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
so
so,
dumb.
like,
Why
I
would
mean-
he let you do that?
I don't know exactly what his thought process was.
All right,
Um,
there's some brain hole shit going on here.
But like I don't think he was a very good player. I don't like want to disparage people, but like he
No,
wasn't
no,
the greatest.
you
It was
queued
like
him.
never working. I was trying to convince him it was never gonna work.
You queued him up.
Anyway.
you gave him the
Yeah. Anyway, I draw for turn, play a land, cast Roaming Throne, and win the game.
Yeah.
That
Solid.
was it. Yeah.
All right,
Solid.
Cool. Yeah. No, it's a solid game where like you I mean you can lead a horse to water.
Yeah.
So let's move on to round 5. Are these both IDs?
No, mine was not an ID. Mine was just a long drawn out game of us continuously wiping each other's board and stopping Roxai.
Yeah, Tameshi's good at that. That's kind of all Tameshi does.
Yep. Tameshi
Yep.
was an interesting matchup with Magda.
Sho can attest. I've played it a couple times against him, and it is very good at drawing.
Yeah. I will say the thing that drew this game is, I'm not gonna explain which one, but I will say it was not Tameshi, was very talkative. Very, very, very talkative, and we lost a lot of time to yap.
Yep. Yap is the time killer.
Yep.
It is the thing that runs the clock down, for sure.
Yeah, I think at least 18 minutes of our game was just yapping.
Yeah, I think some what I'll do, I think next time I go to a tournament, I'll bring a board game sand timer and just have it on 30 seconds and then just be like, let's talk this play out. There you go.
I need a game
Yeah.
action. I need
Yeah.
a game action.
Right. All right. So is that the long and short of it?
Yeah, it was just a long game. We Tameshi. This is the one game where I actually got value out of Gadrak, but
Cool.
it still just ended up draw. Game went too long.
Sure.
It happens.
The Yap strikes back. All right. So now's the interesting one, and I know we have to talk about this a little bit, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
So
I will say, just
I like the asterisk.
in my last game, it was not Rogsai, it was Rogthras.
Oh, the last
that I
game was
drew.
Rogthras?
Yeah. Yeah, it was not a Rogsai, it was a Rogthras. It was also in round 5.
Other side, Julian's.
Other side. Mine. Yeah,
There's
there we
too
go.
much, dude.
It was also not an ID, but it was just like a 40-minute turn on the street urchin's turn.
It wasn't
That happens with that deck.
that
It
wasn't
was Kizit.
was it Kizit?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Kirkland does have long turns.
Yep.
The deck has gotten more complicated with Dockside.
Yeah. Nothing terribly interesting about the game, but yeah, we drew.
All right. So round 6. Let's talk about Julian's first. Was that an ID?
I offered. So it was weird. The Rocco player has 16 points at this point in time. I also have 16 points. The TNK player is sitting at 11, so he's fine with a draw. The Kinnan player has 2 wins and 3 draws, 13 points. So a draw is worthless for the Kinnan player. The TNK player still needs a draw at some point in order to bubble into the
Right.
the top 16.
Better to take a guaranteed draw and hopefully get a win next round.
Yeah. So I'm offered this to Rocco, which is a deal I often offer when I'm looking for draws, and there's only one other player who also does well with the draw. Is I say, hey, would you like to make a deal that if either of us can put win on the stack, we'll offer the draw?
Yeah, I mean it's just positive EV. It's very good.
So I offered Rocco. He was like, I don't know how I feel about that. Let's see how the game goes for a bit. I'm like, okay, fine. My turn 1 is TNK mulls low, and Rocco and Kinnan keeps a turn 1 fish hand.
Mm-hmm.
Rocco keeps a 5 or something. He didn't have a great hand.
Sure.
I went turn 1 mana vault into into Smuggler's Copter Automaton.
Sure.
And then untapped and went Magda, crew twice, sack the treasures, play Metallic Mimic, tap it, sack the treasure for Bloodfire Dwarf.
Dude.
And instantly all 3 of the other players are like, we're fine with the draw now. So all 3 of them start pooling. They start sharing hands and looking for a draw and everything. And Rocco has like nothing. Kinnan just has his fish. But they
Fish
can
into
Rocco.
Rocco Magda, like what is he thinking,
Yikes.
Yeah.
man?
That's a
I
waste.
don't think he kept like the greatest hand for this. I mean, to be fair, he kept like a first 7, and then the T and K mold really low. So maybe he's hoping the T and K would like play a bunch of spells. I don't know. But fourth seat fish against Magda Rocco, not great. But like Rocco has, I learned this like after the game. He has like a crop rot and like one other like instant that he can like help the Kinnan draw. The Kinnan plays his like he just like plays like a mana dork and leaves a mana open so he can play something off the fish. Like he's hoping to draw like Pongify or something. And then TNK like untaps and top decks Orcish Bowmasters. And then like shows the table it, and I'm like, yeah, fine, let's draw.
Because you don't want to. It's basically just going to be a round robin of the heart of the cards for something, and probably not.
Yeah, because I mean, what's going to happen is he's going to play Bowmasters. They're going to feed the fish, wipe my entire board, and then
hand it to Kinnan.
Yeah, and then I have nothing. So I was like, I mulled. I was like, yeah, fine, I'll draw, and and drew the game, which is what I was looking for anyway, right? Going into the game, so I was happy with it.
Cool.
And then
yeah, so
the game.
The game.
The game
of games.
Yeah. Okay. So,
what would you guys like to know about it?
So we're gonna preface this with we know this is the game that got wounded, DQ'd from the tournament. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about whether he should have or shouldn't have, his behavior overall. I am going to ask that we alley-oop this conversation into a discussion about intentional draws and playing for your tiebreakers. But long and short, was there a predetermined draw if there's a win on the stack, like Suicide Pact?
No. The discussion was a draw does no good for any of us. We were all pretty sure 17 was like going to be like maybe one gets in.
Sure.
So we were, and I will preface this as well. The Timna Thrasios in this, the TNT in this pod has 0 to say during this. He does not say a word. He's not involved in this conversation at all, which is what happens at the end and why we did the things we did. Me, the Nezahal, and Max were talking, and we were just like, draws do nothing. We're going to play this out. We're going to try and have a definitive winner. And we all agreed, like, yes, we all want to do that. Game goes around for a while. Obviously, this did not pan out because at the crucial moment, I'll explain how the game happened, but at the crucial moment, the Timna Thrasios player explains, he's like, I never made any of these deals. And I look directly at Max when he says that, and I go, well, if one player doesn't want to play it, and that means we can't concede, so we're going to play this out. And then both me and the Nezahal player were like, yeah, I mean, if he's going to play it out, still a draw does better than a loss for us. So we continued to play it out on his turn. The only part of the whole ordeal that I had any issue with was the fact that he had 15 minutes when he started his turn, and a lot of the time was wasted on yapping.
Specifically arguing over the deal that wasn't made and kind of only exists in his version of the story.
So the situation at the end was like the Nezahal player had Nezahal out with a Sakashima that had caveat. So he had 2 Nezahals, and the TNT had a Orcish Bowmasters. So anytime Max cast something, the TNT was just pinging off Kennen, making him recast, like just holding a gun to his head. And I mean, there was a point where he stopped hitting Kennen. He was like, I'll let you do stuff. Like, yeah, keep going. The thing that actually ended the game was when he tried to slam a Tidespout Tyrant, and I had a sudden shock in hand that I had been holding the entire game for Kennen when he decided to go off.
Right.
And just ended it right there. And that's where he got heated. I will say, I want to say this about it. He was a very big man about it. He actually got my number from a mutual contact, called me the day after, completely apologized, said he was completely wrong about the draws not mattering. He apologized to me for it. He didn't have to do any of that for it, and I don't even know if he'd want me telling anybody that. But he went out of his way to call me and apologize. I have no beef with him
Sure.
in the slightest.
All right. Well, now that we're talking about it, which is fine, I will say it
I
does.
just wanted to make sure people heard about the apology
No,
because like that, I thought that was huge that
and
he
I
did
agree with
that.
you. I 100% agree that it's much better than the last time stuff like that
Mhm.
happened, right? And hopefully these type like his general disposition towards it changes. Continues improving
Mhm.
to the point that we don't actually have the incident to begin with. But what I'll
Mhm.
say is, it doesn't matter if he was wrong, and it was stupid of him to make that kind of big display over something that actually hurt him for not having had the draw, or if he had just drawn, he would have been fine.
And I don't think this ever would have been an issue if it was left to me or any of the other two players in the game. I am fairly certain it was spectators that brought it to the judge's attention
It's very possible. Um,
because we
Mhm.
we all three got pulled from the very beginning of our first game or our next game.
yeah. Um, I mean, bluntly, it just sounds like he was, he's on a fairly short leash in the community, and I don't necessarily know whether that's fair or not. But I don't want to like speculate on what top deck judges are deciding or not deciding based on who wounded is or whatnot. I mean,
Yeah.
I just want people to be generally excellent to each other. I want yappers to respect other people's times and the kind of like sanctity of the game existing as a game instead of a political dog and pony show.
Yep.
And I and
Mhm.
I want everyone to be excellent to each other. Anyway,
Yep. Even when it got most heated, I'll tell you guys what I told the judges. Like it got heated, but at the moment I thought it was getting to be where he was getting close to crossing a line. I just asked him if he would calm down, and he immediately said, "Yes, I'm sorry," and he softened his tone. And
yeah,
we'll say they get a little heated like after that for like briefly, but like it definitely stopped right after that.
right,
But I don't know what's too much for Magic rules. I just know I deal with people like that on the daily, so it wasn't really affecting me too much.
right. I think generally the way we talk, they make rules about this is you kind of want to have a level of decorum so that meek people don't get bullied. Not that
Hmm.
confident people feel comfortable standing up for themselves and like managing the tone in the room,
Hmm.
which is why
Yeah.
you probably had less of a problem with it than the spectators did, right?
Hmm.
But all right. Now that we've totally investigated the situation and talked about it thoroughly, um, moving on to the actual question I wanted to ask about this. So it doesn't seem like you guys had any IDs up to this point, right?
I didn't. In fact, I would say that the tone of the tournament was very much so. Most people were thinking IDs were not going to be good just because of how many players were in this and the fact that we were only playing 7 rounds.
Right. Okay. Um,
Mhm.
I at least that's the tone I felt from most of the people I was in games with.
and it doesn't sound like you guys had any what I'll call as the counterspell draw. Like I could stop either of the inevitable wins, but instead I'll stop neither of them, and we'll just call it a
Hmm.
draw. I don't think I heard either of that come up, and I like that as a I like that political tool as a way to force a draw. I just also don't think draw should award points. um,
I have to tend to agree. I think also the IDs hurt people who are in other pods. It may benefit all of you guys, but it really hurts the people in other games.
I just think I think there's something wrong with the tournament structure that allows for people not playing the game to get a competitive advantage, just in terms
Yep.
of brain drain and the ability to eat.
Yep.
Mhm.
But that's
You
a
take an ID, you go get a snack, you fucking chill. I'm so sorry about my language.
You're fine, dude. We are
Uh, you
we're not a
you get
kids
to
podcast.
refresh. Yeah, you get to refresh, clear your mind. It's definitely nice. In fact, the one game I said that ended quick and I went and got food. I felt so great when I came back and played that last game for the day.
Yeah, right. It gives you a mental reset. You're feeling so much better. That's why they give you a break after round 4 or 5.
Yep.
So on to round 7, our last round of Swiss. Let's start with Julian. Is this an ID or at this point?
So similar situation.
Okay.
Sisse, Matthew Swaney, also ended up in top 16.
Yep.
He is sitting at 17 points. So 3 wins, 2 draws. I'm also sitting at 17 points.
Sure.
3 wins, 2 draws. Kinnon's sitting at 13, and TNT is sitting at 16.
So they both
So
need it.
But the TNT player is the highest breakers 16 pointer by like a good margin. So like I'm trying to tell him like, hey, if you draw, you'll get in. But like a lot of people at this event had this like I was hearing everything. Like some people were saying like you need 4 wins, like no one less than 20 is making it. Some people were like, 117 would make it. Some people were like, no, like 18's the minimum. No one under 18 will make it. I was pretty confident that the way it was going to shape out was that like my guess was somewhere between 2 to 4 17 pointers were going to make it. But so I offered the same thing that I did to the Rocco player
Sure.
in my last game to the Sisse player. Say, hey, do you want to do a thing where, hey, if I can put a win in the stack, or if you can put a win on the stack, we offer the draw. And he thinks about it for a little while, and before the game starts, he's like, you know what? I'll take that deal. We shake hands on it. Game starts. Sisse goes like turn 1 Mystic Remora. It gets instantly mental misstepped by the Kinnan, who is very unhappy by our discussion, and makes it clear
Because he knows it's a 2v1v1, effectively.
Yes. The Kinnan then goes like land, like Mana Rock, I think, or something. I don't remember exactly what the Kinnan does. His board state isn't going to matter that much. The TNT player doesn't do anything too scary, like develops a little bit with like rocks or a dork. I go like turn 1 automaton, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was like a turn 1 automaton, and passes Sisse. Sisse goes Soul Ring. He goes like land, Soul Ring, taps 3, plays a Ristic Study, Kinnan Swan Songs it. Kinnan then like untaps, I think like plays a land, like passes TNT, plays out like Timna and then like draws a card. I go to my turn, I cast Magda, Kinnan mana drains it.
Damn.
Gets to Sisse's turn. Sisse just starts developing, and Sisse and I are sharing hands. So at this point, I know Sisse has like little to no interaction, but good like development.
Sure.
They have an Urtai. That's a piece of interaction.
Right, yeah, Urtai's a great card.
And in my hand is Disruptor Flute and Red Blast.
Dude, Ken's cooked.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for the rest of the game, all I do is hold up Disruptor Flute, Red Blast. I do not develop my board anymore after Magda was countered. It goes around a bit, and Sisse just gets to like, counter. I think he kills Kinnan with Urtai, untaps Saheeli Rise, copies the Urtai, and then kills a Devoted Druid that the TNT player had.
Sure.
Just to clear it off the board.
Uh-huh.
And then I just protected Sisse's win. And the Kin player is really mad. He gets blown up with Mount Doom.
Oh.
And then the TNT player, like, he's like a little, like, because the thing is, he had another event where he was the bottom breaker 17-pointer, and it was the only 17-pointer that didn't make it in. I think it was like the Topdeck Open.
Okay.
So he was like really stressed about making it in on like draws and breakers, but he's like, yeah, like if I don't accept the draw, you know, it's just over, right?
Right.
I have no chance, so I'll accept a chance. You get a draw, and all three of us made it to top 16.
And the kitten was forced
Amazing.
to mauled and seethe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand why he was upset.
Mhm.
So, turns out round 7 had a quick format change to Two-Headed Giant. So,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so Chad, let's talk about your final round, and I want to go back and talk about breaks again, because I skipped a
Cool.
question. I want to that this conversation made it even more relevant. So we got
This was
Elsha, Magda, T and K.
yeah, this was absolutely my tightest and most memorable win.
Sure.
Was it snaz?
This was a very long game. I don't remember specifics of the beginning of the game, but it ended. I started off. I had slammed. I just like hard cast a Maskwood Nexus. Probably I top decked it and had nothing better to do.
Sure.
And they were scared of it. But the thing that I had held in my hand was I had the high speed hover bike and Sokinzen. And there came a point in the game where I had negotiated a lot of stuff, and it was the end step of whoever was before me. I think it was the Elsha. Um, I knew they all had interaction for me because they had all been basically holding me hostage, or like, if you try and do things, you're gonna get removed. We have enough to go over top of you, and I was just kind of agreeing with them for a while because they had no idea I had that. But there was a point where they let me. I got to tutor, and while it was on the stack, I still had 2 more treasures, an untapped dwarf, and enough mana to channel Sokinzen. So they go and try and they go to remove Magda, and we get into this. We're all fighting for it for a second, and then I channel the Sokinzen, flash in the high speed hover bike, and I start tapping everything. And I get to 5 treasures, and I go get the battered golem, and then that won me that game just right there. It was on somebody's end steps. I think that was the first time ever I have channeled Sokinzen and won a game because of it.
Was the Elsha player snazerific?
Maybe. I don't remember the names.
So that's one hilarious because me and Show when we did the last big deck update a few days ago, we were like, Silken's on has come up once in like 100 games for the Maskwood combo, and
Less than that, but
Well, yeah, I
less.
would say probably less. I was so surprised when it happened.
Right, but is like that is the hit that you're counting, and you're gonna ride that and justify Silken's on for the next 200 games where it never comes up. But that's really cool. Like I love the high speed. I love the high speed.
High speed
tech.
hover bike came in clutch. I had a soul ring out, which was I was like, okay, I'll just save my soul ring. That means I've always got access to high speed whenever I
Right.
want it. And I had the 4 mana for the channel, and I was like, all right, when it comes to this instep, they're gonna do their thing to try and interact me, thinking I'm trying to win with this initial activation.
Right. It's so good. I love it, and it's really cool when you get a gotcha like that with when you get to play the you get to play the win con that they weren't expecting and they haven't seen ever before. And so before we move on to the top 16, I want to go back a little bit and look at the we kind of answered this throughout the episode here about how do you approach drawing in the pregame conversation. Like it sounds like you guys just kind of talk honestly. You generally want to play, but if you need the breaks, the ties, or you need the draws, you can just get the draws. And I guess we kind of had that with the mutually assured destruction thing, but it was more of a pregame agreement more than the third player holding player A and B hostage.
Yeah.
So, do you guys think at any point during your play that you stepped over a line in offering draws or politicking for a draw in terms of time wasted?
I don't think me personally, but most other than the one game we've already talked about, I don't think many people were interested in draws in my games.
Sure.
I can't even remember anybody asking if we wanted to ID. I think every time I heard, so an ID does no good for anybody. That's what was said at most of my tables.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, I was trying to ID. Once I had 3 wins, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna draw, because drawing is so easy. Like obviously, like if my hand is just like broken, I'll just like dump out a win, which is like what I did in round 6.
Mhm.
I just like barfed all the dwarves into play, and I was like, okay, well, I'm either just gonna win the game next turn, or it's gonna be a draw, right?
Sure.
But yeah, like I do think a lot of people specifically at this event were like very anti draw.
Do you think that's a cultural thing, or do you think the 240 was and the nebula
340.
What's that? Like
Three-
how much was it?
324.
324.
Oh,
There's
Jesus.
324 players. Yeah.
324. Yeah. Do you think that had more to do with it? The fact that
Yeah.
breakers were more nebulous.
I think that had more to do with it, but the difference is that when so many people are like, we're not gonna draw, the few people that do are gonna make it in.
Yep.
Which like if you look like,
I think that's why so many 17s made it in, because there was 4 of us.
yeah, 4 17s made it. All the 18 pointers made it.
Yep.
And there's like a bunch of people that played for a 4th win, where if they had just played for draws, they probably would have made it, or
Yep.
at least would have had like a coin flip chance of making it.
Like breakers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on breakers. Because half the 7, I think it was over half. I think there was 7 17 pointers, and 4 of them made it.
And all the talk I heard the whole day, whole time, was only 117's gonna make it. That is what I heard the whole day. Only one's gonna make it. Only one's gonna make it.
And that doesn't sound like it's a psyop, because it seems like it's actively bad for players that that are on the borderline to think that they are in worse position than they are, and force the people that are at 17 already, or not 17, but
We'll say it sounded reasonable, because I think if I recall correctly, last year at the Boil, 17 was the cut as well.
Right.
And for there to be 240 players at that one and 17 be the cut, and then go to a 324 player event and still only playing 7, I think we should have played 8 by Topdeck's own rules. But to only play 7 there, a lot of people were worried. I mean, I was one of them. I did not think 17 was going to. I was like, if anybody can break Topdeck's rules, it's Topdeck, right?
Right.
The main thing is the algorithm change.
Mm-hmm.
So like previously it would just like pair the best players. So like, for example, when I was at 17 points, in the old algorithm, I'd probably be paired with 3 other 17 pointers, and we'd be like, want to go get lunch?
Yep.
And secure our top 16? Sure. Right?
Yeah.
But now they divided the people. And
it tries to make it so everybody plays, right?
And
so there was tons of rounds where people that who would have drawn in those rounds if they could just like ID couldn't, partially because like they're scared of not getting the rest of the draws, right? Because like if you need if the thought process is like get multiple draws or just one win, some people are more confident, whether or not that's like correct, like statistically, they're more confident in just like, I'll just get the 4th win, right?
Right.
Rather than trying to like draw this game, draw the next game, and then hopefully draw even the next game, right?
Yep.
Was there any placement related benefits for finishing high in Swiss?
There are. So like 1st through 4th get 1st seat.
Yeah.
And 5th through 8th get 2nd seat.
Sure.
And so on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I
mean, that's another reason. It's just.
Oh yeah, for sure. Which I mean, like seating does matter a lot. So like if your ultimate goal is like maximizing your chances to like win the tournament, getting top 16 good seating is like probably statistically meaningful.
Yeah.
But like this is my first tournament above like 60 players,
Sure.
right? So I was just like, I'm totally fine with having flown out here and getting top 16. I don't need something crazy. But even then, like, I went with my strategy of like just drawing every round once I had 3 wins, and I ended up with a second seat in top 16.
Yep.
So,
All right. Let's poke at that top 16. So let's start with the end of someone's run. How did this game go for you, buddy? Also, Essica in the top 16. Fucking poggers in the chat.
yeah,
John's
cool deck.
good.
Yeah, no, yeah, cool player. This, I will, even though I lost this game, this is by far like one of the best games of CDH I've like ever played. Just the experience, like everybody was like talkative, we were joking around, having fun. Even like the 2 judges sitting with us, we were like cracking jokes with them.
You guys had a crowd at the end too.
Yeah, it was super fun. It was a great game. But it is also an example of why I hate being matched with Kinnan. So like I talked about this a bit earlier about how, like, the Rogsai isn't going to tutor their bowmasters for you, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They're more interested in accelerating their own game plan. This is not just exclusive to Kinnan, but when there are other decks in the pod that Bowmasters is good against, people are inclined to get Bowmasters or keep hands with removal, right? And I like after the game, like I talked to like the Essica player was like, yeah, I kept a Swords Bowmaster's hand because there was a Kinnan and a Magda in the pod, right?
Yep.
Whereas if that Kinnan isn't there and it's replaced with something else, maybe the Essica player decides to mull for something that's like more proactive and
right,
like focused around them actually winning the game. What ended up happening was the Essica player mystical tutors for an Eladomri's call for an Oppo agent, Oppo's a Imperial Seal and gets a second Bowmasters.
That's pretty fun.
So I played against double Bowmaster Oppo for the entire game.
Wow, that sounds like Magda's dream.
Yeah.
I never removed any of them.
Yeah.
I had a Crime Magda with Lightning Greaves on it. And it was basically like the Essica player was like, hey, if you ever try to equip that Lightning Greaves, like other people just had like instant speed draw a card available for like half the game.
Yeah, it's just like,
and it's like, oh, they're just gonna kill Magda if you try to equip that Lightning Greaves to it, which is like, yeah, that happens. But they were finally putting on the Crime Magda, and the Crime Magda almost got me there.
She's good.
My mistake was not realizing that Kinnan had a like I knew it, but I didn't think about it enough. They had Minamo and a One Ring,
right?
And so they were just drawing a bunch. So I think me losing this game comes down to a single attack swing that should have gone at Kinnan and not Essica. And if I had just attacked Kinnan, we kill Kinnan when they're trying to combo off.
Yep.
By me tapping One Ring, and with double Bowmasters, the Kinnan just dies.
Right.
But I didn't. I swung at. My thought process was like too shallow, I decided to put Essica on a 1-turn clock, which is like a pretty easy mistake to make because the thought process is like, oh, I'll swing, put them down to like dead next turn 3 dragons, and I have a Maskwood Nexus out, so I can just like swing these dragons. I have a Zorn in hand. I'll just win the game when this Oppo leaves the board. But yeah, Kinnan ended up winning. Same Kinnan player I lost to earlier, Varix. I mean, like, insanely good player. Props to him. I'm not unhappy with the placement I got. I'm totally fine with my run ending here.
Yeah, dude.
It was a great game.
Is this the biggest tournament of the year?
Yeah,
Biggest
the biggest tournament ever.
Biggest tournament ever.
Damn. Well, I mean, congratulations for making ninth there, right?
Yeah, but let's hear about Chad championing it to top 4.
Winning from seat 4 in a pod against Rogsai, Sisse, and Temnocrom. What the fuck?
This is the game where Blood Moon won it for me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it was also a game where what we talked about earlier. Rogsai was going first, and I was like, let's let these dudes deal with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say I started off turn 1 Dwarf, turn 2 was Volatile Fault into a Soul Ring that I then slammed the Blood Moon.
There you go.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Volatile Fault. It was Mutavault. It was Mutavault, and I didn't do it that turn. I did it the next turn because my first I put out the Soul Ring, and then I tapped for 3, and I played Magda on a Springleaf Drum.
Understood.
That way, and then the next cycle, they tried to stop Rogsai. He was doing some nasty Rogsai stuff, and got back to me, and I slammed the Blood Moon, and then just shut all of them out because I think Rogsai was the only one with rocks, but he was down to like no cards in hand. And then very shortly after, I had a God Pharaoh statue out, and eventually got to where I got a roaming throne as well, and then it was just over. Came down to a pretty hefty battle at the end step of the Timnocrom. Like they were trying to get, like, I want to say, kept tapping my dwarves and trying to make treasures. They would interact. I would just go over them again with another tap to make 2 more treasures with the throne out, and eventually they just didn't have enough removal to stop me
from restarting.
Yep. Yeah, it wasn't even restarting. It was the getting to the 5 treasures to start. Like, so I tapped 1, got my Magda triggers on the stack, and then that's when they would try to interact. I would tap another one because I had a vehicle for crewing.
Right.
They'd try and interact then. And oh yeah, that's right. I had Zorn out, not roaming throne. It was Zorn.
Yeah. So you were getting. It was doubly hard for that reason.
Yes. Yeah. They first tried with like a swords on the Zorn, and then I responded with another tap, and then they tried to. I think the next was a deadly Rollick targeted at Magda herself. Went over it with another dwarf, and eventually they just couldn't keep me from doing it. I think somebody had removed the Blood Moon at that point because the thing that ended up winning me that little battle was the Volatile Fault. I had popped somebody's Gaia's Cradle and then went and got 2 treasures out of it.
Cool. Very good.
Grabbed clock and did the thing with the throne.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a good win. Let's talk about a hopefully a good loss, but maybe.
No, I'm still shooting myself in the face for so many. Where actually 2 game this game was mine to lose. I had two game losing punts.
Right, let me make this look right.
You don't put loss, put punt. This is where poor sequencing is my first one, and then the second one is just inexperience. But
I honestly don't know if you would have been called for the sequencing if chat wasn't going off about it.
I don't think so either. And I mean, in my head, I had already said I'm playing the bark form, then the what do you call it, the dampening sphere.
Yeah.
And the way I said, when I was thinking about that in my head, I I slid bark form on top of my like my hand, and then I put the dampening. I was like, and then I'm gonna play dampening sphere. I put it on top of that, and then we talked for a bit, and I basically just let my mind wander, and I was like, all right, cool, we're done with this turn. I'm just gonna play my last 2 spells, pass it out, and I played the
Them in the wrong order. Yeah.
I played them in the wrong order. Yep,
I have
and that
absolutely lost the games the exact same way I had it. It was like I had it
and
in the bag, and then
the thing is, I had the Pinnacle Monk in hand, and I could have just played it as an extra land. I was being so greedy, and I was keeping it in hand in case I needed to return the sudden or the Siege Smash.
chaos.
That
Warp.
was, yep. It felt bad, but I mean, I thought I played well in the beginning of this game, and then near the end is when that kind of mental fatigue kicked in.
Yeah, dude. I said it. I don't know if it was to you, but I've said
Hmm.
in response to the punt. I said, top 4 is like watching UFC boxers go 10 rounds, and now they're
Hmm.
just like sweatily slap fighting with each other because neither of them are able to stand properly. They're all concussed out and
I
whatnot,
mean, that's why these tournaments have day 2s, which is only 2
which
games.
is good.
But
Yep.
still,
Which is
So
good.
I will say this game there was a lot when you watch the stream. It looks like there's a lot of weird decisions being made, and that is because that moment that the first Thrasios activation where he reveals the basalt and puts it in hand. Immediately, both the Timnothraces are on high alert because they just assume I'm not going to be able to interact, and I was definitely sandbagging. I kept the hand intentionally with the Seed Smash because I knew this. I was like, I'm just not going to lose to Kennen. I'm not. That's not happening.
Man, I
Um,
was playing an RPG while you were in the final pod with and I would just the siege smash from the top rope, and it was it just people just like screaming and chat about it. It was I was very helpful at that moment.
but
Kevin's reaction to it was beautiful.
dude, it was so funny. I love on the stream how they acted. They were like, "Oh man, it looks like there's some emotions." Like, and the stream thought he was getting angry. Like, not at no point did Kevin have anything other than a laugh and like a sigh of like, "Oh, what is this?"
What is this
We were
card?
having a good we were having a good time. But like, so the things I gathered from this was while the 2 Timothrasioses were trying to discuss how they were going to stop Kennen. First off, the second Timothrasios, not Jordan, not the guy who won, Andy, he had mulled down to 4. He
Oh,
had
poor
not,
guy.
he was, and honestly, it was a great 4. He has a win attempt at one point in the game, but he does get stopped. Um,
The Rog side for
they're sharing
basically.
hands about it, and with them sharing hands, I learned that Andy has a silence, and that the other Timothrasios, I don't know if Jordan wanted Andy to share this information, but he showed him his hand, and immediately Andy just says out loud, he's got Thoracle Consult in hand. And so the rest of our decisions were made knowing that Jordan could slam the win at any moment, and nobody had interaction if we stopped Kennen. Um, anyways, it gets back around to where it's about to be Kennen's turn. Jordan decides, or Andy just looks around. He starts talking to us. Should I do it? Should I do it? And he plays the silence. Kevin mana drains it, and that's when Jordan. They thought we had lost. The basalt gets. He goes to his turn. He's just like, okay. In Kevin's head, he's like, I can play assault, and then if anybody tries to interact on the first interaction, I have enough mana to just try and untap it again and
Yeah.
go over it.
Right.
And so
Do
that
Magda
was his
things.
mindset. Yeah, exactly. He was like, I'm gonna do the Magda, and I'm like, no, dude, you can't do Magda against Magda. Um, Gets it in, taps it, goes to untap, hit him with a siege smash, just destroy his dreams, and then it goes to Jordan's turn. And part part of what we had all done was Jordan had made a deal to not go for the win if we spend interaction to stop Kennen from winning. He said he will play value, he will pass the turn, and then after that the game is fair. After like it's fair game, he'll go for it whenever after that. And that's why when it gets back to my turn, I make
You
that
had
very weird
a whatchamacallit on field the entire time though. The
survival of the fittest.
survival, but you
Yes.
later said you didn't know that that line existed.
I did not know about the Hazel Brew Bastard.
Oh, it's
No,
such a good
no.
line, dude.
That's the one where, and the thing is, I'll talk about it when I get to it. But so Jordan plays value, passes to Andy, and this is the turn where Andy Eldritch Evolution his bird, into a Thassa and then tries the demonic consultation right over it. And it's like, I am so happy. At that moment I was so happy I had sandbagged that siege smash and got him to waste that silence, because that would have just absolutely been game.
Yep.
And he goes for it, and Jordan just has a swan song, counters the demonic consultation, turns over, he gets a bird and passes. And then when it gets to me, this is where I have to negotiate with Andy to let me get a dwarf in without it being blocked. And this is the whole reason that on my main phase and everything, I go fetch out a God Pharaoh statue. We knew what was in Jordan's hand. We knew that he wouldn't be able to cast it with a God Pharaoh statue. So my deal with Andy was like, hey, if you let me go get this in, let me get the 5 treasures. I'm not going to use this for any sneaky tricks. I'm not going to pass with it up, because if he lets me keep them up to try and respond, and then Jordan knows that, and Jordan decides I'm not going to slam right now because he's just going to stop me, there's no way anybody is going to want to let a Magda untap with 5 treasures already on board. Like, just not going to happen. So I negotiate my way into saying, if I get 5 treasures, I will crack this immediately, and I'll just go get a God Pharaoh statue, and we will. I said God Pharaoh statue, but I also said, honestly, we can look through the library, because you can show the information. I was like, we'll look through the library together, and if we can find a better answer, that's fine. But I think it's going to be God Pharaoh statue. And
Good
you
answer.
can see you can sit there and see me pick. Like, I picked through a few things. We considered the disruptor flute, but I didn't think that was going to do enough.
The problem
So.
is knowing that Jordan had Thassa's decon in hand as well.
Mhm.
Um, like you had to go get it because otherwise they just win.
Yep.
And they were already showing their other win condition on the field, so it's like they protected their own win, which is super smart.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like you were stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yep. So I just went and got the God Pharaoh because I was like, I know that this means he will not have the mana to slam it, and I had the damping sphere in play. So I was like, if this buys us 1 turn, I'm gonna play this damping sphere, and then he will have no chance of doing any of that.
Right.
So anyways, that's what happens, and I was pretty happy because I don't know if it's this turn or the next, but there's a turn where Kennen flips into a Hullbreaker Horror, and
It's that turn cycle.
yeah, and that's when I was like, okay, all this increasing the mana cost for this thing is actually even going to be relevant even against Kennen, because he's not going to be able to keep casting and returning things to our hands.
Right.
And if he ever hit flip Tide Spout, there's no way he's going infinite with the Damping Sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it gets to it does get back to me. No, this is I top decked the bark form here. And this is when I thought I had it in the bag, because I was going to play that bark form and then that damping sphere, and I played them in the wrong order. And that 1 treasure I had that I had to get rid of because of this misplay was the 1 treasure that was keeping me from getting to 5 on my next turn.
Damn, bro.
Did you get to your next turn though?
It
Because
did get to my next turn, because then I passed with my second punt was after I didn't make any more treasures because nobody was going to let me in without blocking. I had in my hand a Talon Gates of Madara.
yeah.
Yep. And this is where I will say my inexperience. And when he played that Hazel Brewmaster, I briefly read it, but they were explaining it to me as I was reading it, and I just handed it back, and I was like, okay, cool. So he's gonna make a food, and then that food's gonna become the devoted druid. And in my head, I'm thinking, cool, we can let him make the food, and then he's gonna exile the devoted druid. And so I passed on it, let him make the food, and then it's like, oh no, he already has the ability just because the food got made. Like that is there now, and the Talon Gates is not going to have the timing to stop this. And my point of interaction was to Talon Gates and phase it out on the stack, or while it was targeting the devoted
While
druid.
it was targeting the devoted druid.
Yep. I was thinking it was make the food, and then there was the target in exile.
Yep.
There was the problem though that Kennen still had 2 cards in hand,
Mm-hmm.
and they clearly were not lands. Otherwise, he would have played them the previous turn.
No, they were lands. He had a
They were
yeah. Because we knew what Kennen's hand was the whole time. In fact, there was
okay. Then if there
the
was no
turn.
risk, like then yeah, you would have at least gotten another turn cycle, but because Kennen would have needed to remove both your God Pharaohs and
So
Damping Sphere to win the game with Hullbreaker Horror, which wasn't going to happen if they had multiple lands in hand.
if he was phased out and it got to my turn, I it would have taken some aggressive politicking to get what I wanted out of it, but I still think Jordan would have won if I'm being totally honest.
Right.
Hey, but, I mean,
Because
still getting
because
that point
the
of
only
forcing
I've thought about it a million times, and the only thing I could have presented was to, since Kenan had Coldbreaker, it's like, look, let me get 5 treasures. I'll wait till your turn. You draw and see if you got a spell that you can cast on Jordan's turn to make him return the Broodmaster to hand. If not, let me crack the 5 treasures to go get. Which this is where any rational person would say no. Let me get clock. I will make 5 treasures. You have the spell skite, so you can redirect the clock back to your spell skite at any time and force me to stop doing what I'm doing. I'll make 5 treasures. Go get spine, kill the food, and then when he phases back in on his upkeep, I will make 5 more treasures. Get a sculpting steel to copy it. Kill the Hazel Brewmaster, and then while I'm sitting here with clock on the board, I know that sucks for everybody. At least we keep getting turn cycles, and Kenan has the spell skite in order to, if I ever try and start redirecting. I think I had enough artifacts where it would have taken him like 4 instances of paying 2 life for the redirect.
Right.
Yeah.
Which he could have just stopped. Like I never would have been able to do anything with it.
You could always do the thing that we have talked, or Rust and I have talked about before, where there was one tournament where he had to basically talk someone into letting him use clock to remove something, right?
Yeah.
So in order to get a better board state out of it, instead of using spine, and this is also technically one of the reasons why maybe running spine might be better as far as politicking goes, is that when you present that, you can go, okay, I'm going to generate a board state that will deal with that, but part of generating that board state requires you to get something that will make something into an artifact. So liquid metal torque requires you to get Maskwood Nexus so that you can get your plundering barbarian to destroy whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right.
At that point, you have gained more advantage, and you've basically gotten 3 or 4 potential activations out of it, and then you can freely destroy your clock. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Basically,
Yeah.
put an end point on your
because at that point you can untap your clock, and then untap your liquid metal torque, make your dude into a artifact, and then copy it with sculpting steel. So that you enter, kill your own clock, and now you're left with 2 dwarves, a Maskwood Nexus, and a liquid metal torque.
Yep.
What I will say is that in a top 4 situation, I don't think players are going to be that inclined to have that prize.
There's no reason they give me that clock, because all that would take from my end is to not hold up my bargain, and once he lets me get the clock and get 5 treasures, I use the spine on his spell skite, and then I just win.
So
yeah,
sure, but
so there's no reason they let me do it.
The problem, well, I mean, in this particular game, right? You had already decided to split the prize, correct?
Yeah, we were only playing for points and glory.
If you were already playing for points and glory, then there's no reason for them to not believe that you're going to hold up your end of the bargain.
That's also fair.
Well, no.
And to be fair, I totally would, but
you
just
disagree?
like I could see myself being tempted by it.
Why do you disagree?
I think I mean, okay. At least talking to a lot of people, including the Kenan player, like no one was there for the money. At least the people who really wanted to win.
We're there for the points in the invite.
Right. Yeah, people are there grinding points for the invitational, which is why I was really happy with top 16, because top 16 is just like a ton of points.
How many points did you get for that?
I got 330.
Oh, that's
yeah,
incredible. Yeah,
it's equivalent to like a platinum. It's more than a platinum top 4, which I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like it should be less, but I'll take it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when I saw how many points I got, I was like, I might as well have gotten an invite right there.
Yeah. No, I think it's gonna be really tough for anyone to qualify for the invitational without getting a top 16 at a diamond.
I mean, isn't that how it should be? If we're only inviting
Yeah.
64 players, like you
Right.
should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. You gotta invite the best of the best.
All right.
Is it? Yeah.
So we've plumbed that game pretty well, and that's good because it was the top 4. So obviously you guys did pretty well. We wouldn't be talking this long if you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It would have ended up with do better next time. If you scrubbed out at 0-5.
Yeah.
So how do you feel your particular version of the deck did? Let's start with Julian.
Let's just say I drew the good cards and not the bad cards. I think I only saw like a handful of cards that weren't like very traditional Magda cards.
Okay.
So like, I liked Soul Cauldron. I was like happy with that card.
Sure.
I thought it was good.
I like that include, by the way. That's one I think I'm gonna slot.
Yeah. I think that was like the one card that was like, I put it in and I was like, yeah, that ended up doing what I put it in the deck for.
Yeah.
And I was fine with it. Everything else, I don't have any like particular good words or super bad words to say about them.
Right.
Yeah.
Could have been any other card in the deck. You didn't see it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Chad?
I mean, throughout the entire tournament, like we were talking earlier before this, I think I only saw maybe 30 to 40% of my deck. So it's hard to say if any of those other cards were good enough or not. I think the cards I got, like Julian said, I drew the cards that I needed to in a lot of these games. There were some things that shined for me. I did not expect Gadrak to be as useful as he was. I thought he was kind of a barely making it into my deck list. Kind of put him in there because I saw him in I think it was Russ or I just started searching Moxfield for Magdas and looking at some of the stuff people were using and slotting it in, and I saw that and I was like, oh, that's a dragon I have. It's right here. Sure, let's throw it in and see how it works. And turns out it's pretty good with Portal.
Cool.
Probably would have been better with the delayed blast fireball you guys tell me I need to put in my deck.
Well, I mean, the portal thing is really funny because if you have a tapper already, and each opponent has 3 creatures, which isn't super uncommon, you just portal, play Godrak, make 9 treasures, get Roaming Throne,
And win.
tap Roaming Throne, go grab Clock.
And you have the
Yep.
+1.
And then
That's
untap the Roaming Throne, and then crew it. Do that a couple times with the treasures, make a copy of Roaming Throne, then go net positive.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a really good line.
Yeah.
I really like it. I think I'll keep him around. I
think I
considering
want to
not
claim
running
that
him.
one. I think I want to say that that one's might be my like only contribution to this deck.
Is that one of your hot techs?
Gadrak's been a card that I like, even when no one believed in it, I was super cope about it like the entire time. And I was like, but it does this cool thing with Portal.
Yeah.
And I'm usually one person who's like, don't keep a card just because it works well with one other card,
But
They're
then you
both-
realize, oh, it makes me extra
Right.
treasures if they block. Oh,
Exactly. No. That point you mentioned is like I can swing my dwarves and I'll get a treasure, and if they block it, I'll get another treasure. Cool.
And it blocks Timna and blocks a Tivit that for 1 turn cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's just so. I was going to ask, was there any cards outside of the ones we talked about early on in the episode that like over or underperformed like crazy aside from Gadrak? Open question. Whoever wants to answer.
I'm throwing Academy Manufacturer out the deck.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe there's stuff about it that I'm not getting, but I just don't find it that great. Maybe for tight clock lines where you need the extra artifacts. I don't know.
It's for lines that don't use clock at all.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Because like
Inexperience right
say-
here. You're gonna have to
yeah.
explain it to me.
yeah, so you have Magda, a dwarf, a tapper, and then 5 treasures. Everything's on tap, right? With your Academy Manufacturer, obviously.
Hmm.
You activate Academy Manufacturer or activate Magda, go and get your Mirror of the Forebears, make it a copy of Academy Manufacturer. You now make 3 treasures every time you tap. Tap your Magda and your Dwarf to make 6. Go and grab Maskwood Nexus, tap both of your dudes, make another 6. Go and grab Roaming Throne or Zorn. Now you're making 6 per tap. You go and grab the other one. Now you're making 9 per tap. And then you can make a copy of Roaming Throne with your Sculpting Steel. And now you're making 18 per tap. And then
That's
you win the game by using Bark Form Harvester and then looping your Dwarven Scorcher to force kill one of your other dwarves, looping 2 dwarves at once to make 36 treasures, and then you're using
12.
12 in order to put them up back in your deck, or 14
I
or
mean, you
whatever.
can make infinite with like Crime Magda once you get Zorn and
Yeah, you can do Valka stuff at
Roaming
that
Throne.
point.
Yeah, but this is doable without
I see
name
instant
phase.
speed.
Yeah,
Sure.
this is doable at instant speed.
Right.
So like,
Oh, you can get your clock once you have Roaming Throne.
yeah,
And, like,
you can do a whole
50
bunch of things at that
treasures.
point. Like once you're
Yeah.
making six plus treasures, you can just go grab your battered
Yep.
golem or whatever else.
The-
Like it's
The thing about AM I want to throw in is it
Yeah.
works in a lot of situations where it's basically like a third RT or Zorn in the sense that it does the thing that just goes from 0 to 60 with 5 treasures effectively, and on boards that are fairly ubiquitous. So if you get there with one version of it, you can do the 2 a.m. Combo automatically,
So-
right?
I think my issue with the card and the reason I didn't run it
Sure.
was like the floor is like
the
Basement.
floor is
The first time
you
you
draw a card and get bowmastered and die.
yeah, but, I mean, regardless of Bowmasters, like the first time you get value out of that card, you've spent 5 mana and drawn 1 card.
Sure.
And it's just really like, yeah, it can pseudo fill the like role of an artifact dwarf by like sometimes winning the game with 1 tutor. But I think just a 3 mana artifact dwarf in the same slot is going to be better most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think that's a fair point.
I do think that like the board states where a caddy manufacturer is there is usually less likely to get interacted with than something where you just played a 3 mana.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So like
Yeah.
there's some pros and there's some cons, obviously. The
Yeah.
card that I want to talk to you guys about is Godpharaoh statue. Now, outside of the situation where you knew that your opponent had Thoracle Decon in hand, and they successfully politicked you into playing it to prevent them from doing it,
Hmm.
to protect their own other win. What? How did the card perform for you through the rest of the weekend for both of you? Because like personally, I haven't first tutored this in any matchup except for Rogsai, and I'm of the agreement that like we're not the Rogsai police right now.
Yeah. I think this card is bad. No.
I
I
don't think we've played.
I don't think it's bad.
Yeah, go ahead.
It helped me a lot. It helped me a lot in the tournament. I pulled it out in multiple games.
Okay. I never tutored it, nor wanted to. I to be fair, I am playing like a higher quantity of artifact doors, I think.
Right.
Um,
Well, you're technically net even because of Mirror of the Forebears versus like
sure. Well, I'm playing both the 3-tree
You're-
sentinel and
yeah, you're playing maybe
the,
one more.
the metallic mimic. I wanted to have Mirror Forebears in, and also adaptive automaton, the Lord.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think
I wanted-
adaptive is actually still really important in a Bowmaster meta.
It's-
Like
Is adaptive the one where it gives a counter when you enter, or is it the one that
No,
just
it's
buffs
metallic mimic.
passively?
the one that buffs
just passive.
buffs
Okay.
passively 3
Yep.
mana.
I think
That's the
Mimic-
one
Metallic
I
Mimic
prefer.
is the
I think they're both too good to cut right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember if I have metallic in mine or not, but when I think about cutting one
You
of
do
them,
not.
it's that one first.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
I think I just want both. I
Yeah.
think both are just very.
I will say I think I'm probably going to migrate back to that. I don't think you can have enough artifact dwarfs.
Mhm.
Well, I think Bloodline Pretender is hot garbage, and I don't think we need.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't. I think that's sort of like the
After Bark
threshold.
Form came out, there's no reason,
Yeah.
zero reason for that.
I think you might want a 3 tree mascot, but like, I mean, I think 80% of my like attraction to that card is the fact that I have a nice, gorgeous AP of it. um,
Fair.
Bling does drive the heart of many dwarves. Um, so, are there any cards that you're looking, aside the ones we just talked about, any cards you're looking to slot in the future? Like, immediately, like, I want to put this in right now?
Agatha's Soul Cauldron.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ma-
that for
Magda,
me, I'll probably throw that in there.
I mean, the TNT lists um, are using the graveyard for their secondary and tertiary win cons, right?
Yep.
Um, Blue Farm,
I mean,
Intuition,
there's a lot of niche decks that use it too, and
oh
you can
yeah,
just shut that.
into
You can
meshing.
shut them off just by one well timed graveyard
And
exile.
it's a gun. You just
Yep.
get to hold up.
Yeah.
You get to
Yep.
hold it up for interaction. You get to hold it up for protection. It's a weird good card, and especially if you're playing the version of the deck that the majority of the people on the server are. I would say is like pretty tempo, pretty removal heavy. People are really thinking about Gadrak.
I mean,
There's
even
there's
if you're just turning your dwarves into mana dorks, that's amazing.
Yeah.
right.
That's
Yeah. It's
amazing.
totally fine.
And it gives
Um,
you more targets for your removal because now it's not a 1 for 1, it's a 2 for 1, or maybe even a 3 for 1 if you blank removal, right?
Hmm.
So it's something there. There's definitely something there. Um, any other cards?
I want to ask Sunglasses why he's not playing Grafdigger's Cage.
Oh. Um.
Is that an accident?
No. No. I
Oh.
cut that card on purpose. So I. So let's compare it to like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, right?
Sure.
Because I feel like Agatha's is like good enough graveyard hate for what I want it to be.
Sure.
The Cage, I found that too many of the decks that it was like in the deck for played around it fine.
Can you give
Um,
examples?
Like I think Kinnan plays around it like relatively fine. Like they can
They just go
still
the Tinker variety. Or the,
yeah, like there's plenty of options that they had to play around it. Like the breach decks, like oh they just pivot to Thoracle, it's whatever. I was like also pretty heavily expecting like TNK and Roxai to like not or TNK to not be as relevant, and then like Roxai to be lower in population. And like I said before, I'm not trying to like stop Roxai as
Right.
much anymore.
Mhm.
So it's like more about like TNT, and that card does like not that much against TNT.
Yeah.
They
Sure,
play
but
around
like
it
the two
perfectly
field
fine.
tutors that a lot of decks
Sure.
are reliant on now all get shut down.
Something.
Yeah, I mean it's
Go
but
ahead.
like in the same case, I won like for example, I've won so many games and won this tournament where I'm tutoring Roaming Throne into play.
Right.
And stopping being able to like tutor for Roaming Throne for like a card that kind of sort of stops some decks was just not worth it. And so I felt like it just wasn't enough equity.
It's not a card that
as
you
a
felt
card.
you wanted to see in your hand.
Yeah.
You were fine with
exactly.
it being a tutor target when necessary, but
Yeah.
like realistically, that's not what your game plan is. It's not to stop the opponent; it's to win.
Yeah, exactly. I was
Yeah.
just trying to put wins on the stack as fast as possible, essentially.
I can totally agree with the mindset of not wanting it in your hand. It's definitely a tool you want to tutor when it's necessary, and other than that, you'd hope you never see it.
Hmm.
So that raises the question: if we're trying to spot removal some quote unquote problem cards in the bin rather than stop um, stop like two field tutors or what have you, would you think that Agatha's is a interesting swap for that?
Yeah. So like, yeah, basically my logic there is that Agatha's does the job like well enough. I feel like the single target graveyard hate it just stops enough, but then like Agatha's has some other benefits like saving you from bowmasters and
Sure.
occasionally netting you a like relevant ability.
Mm-hmm.
I just need my cards to do as much as possible, and Grafdigger's Cage just does not do enough as a card in your hand.
It also makes you have to work backwards to get to your win.
Yep.
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 Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think I agree with the whole like use your opponents, not your cards, to deal with Rogsai. That'll be something to look at because it seems to have a higher EV than just mulling to Rogsai interaction.
I mean, I think in this particular meta, it's fair for us to be more parasitic
Yeah,
in a
Mhm.
way.
I
Yeah.
mean, when mid-range decks exist to generate value, make them use it.
Right. Um,
I will say I feel like I cope a bit, and I always like to say, I don't care about Graph Diggers, Magda. We can play around with it. We can play around it without any issue. But then I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, well, maybe Roaming Throne has become a little bit of a crutch for me because it definitely hurts when I can't go tutor Roaming Throne.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's like the best card in the deck.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Thank you,
that is
Ixalan. Thank you.
that is twin shot sniper. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Twin Shot Sniper is also amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love red Otawara. Um,
Yeah.
who knew it was a goblin? So um, let's. The last thing I want to ask you guys before we talk about like the deck on a macro scale is about your play. Um, in let's call it your mulls, your finding your win window, politicking, sandbagging. What do you guys think you guys did really well at, and what do you guys think you could improve at as players?
I don't think it's possible to be a successful Magda player without being a good politicker.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to be able to talk to the table. Um, I would say I felt like I played pretty well up until the later rounds of the first day, and I played super solid on the final day up until the final game after some brain drain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mulligans were
I
pretty
agree.
solid.
All right, Julian.
I had so like I have a pretty strict like because you mentioned mulligans. Like I hold myself to like just keep as many cards in my hand as I can.
Yep.
I did not mull below 6 the entire weekend.
I found a lot
It's
of
interesting.
I found a lot of
Yeah.
success playing more or less that way with Magda.
Well,
I
you're
was
also on a
just
lot more mountains, which makes a lot more hands keepable.
yes,
Yep.
I was playing very heavy red. I was not playing as much colorless lands. I just want my like I was literally just keeping hands that were just like, oh, this just like puts some dwarves on the battlefield, and that's good enough. Like that's all I wanted to do. The entire like tournament was just put dwarves into play, and I kept any hands that did that at a reasonable pace.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say in this current
Yeah.
meta, I feel much better with just a land 1-drop dwarf pass as a
Right.
turn one. I feel way
Yep.
safer doing that.
And that was the bad hand. That was like the this is my 5, I guess.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
would say, Julian, I was like you. I've
don't think I've found myself mulliganing below 6 except for one very specific game, and I would say even in that game, I felt like the mulligan to 4 was justified. It was actually the round 6 game, and I kept I'm not gonna lose hand. I think I kept 4, and it was like a land disruptor flute. Maybe it was 2 lands disruptor flute and a it was another one. It was the sudden shock, another
Yep.
split second thing.
Got
And I was
that.
basically
Yeah.
and like the first round of turns, both the Kennen and the Tim the Thrasios had Thrasios out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, cool, I'll slam this disruptor flute and just name Thrasios. You guys aren't getting any value out of that right now. Sorry.
Yeah, just trying to make the game last as long as you can to try and get back into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You know, I mean,
Being
yeah,
on-
sometimes like you have to mull low, and it's the game. It happens.
Yeah. Being on so many mountains, what are your thoughts on Wintermoon?
I literally have Wintermoon right in front of me, because
might try
I'm
it.
putting it in the deck. I think this is like
I think it's a good replacement for
Wintermoon's
Godfather statue.
Wintermoon's time. I actually, I think this would have been a better target than Godfarrow's statue in most of my games to tutor.
So
Yeah.
I played one game where I was playing against I want to say it was a TNT or a Sultai deck a while ago, and the ability to layer with Winter Orb or Winter Moon when you have anything else on the field is just unparalleled. It's just like, oh, they're tapped out. They did set up things so they could stop me the next turn. They're not going to get another turn where they get to actually use their lands, and it just does that for you. It is a wonderful, oh shit, they've got it on their turn card. Like
It can definitely king make Kinnan in some of those situations, but like outside of Kinnan specifically, it's very, very ubiquitous as to how it sort of slows things down.
Nearly a fifth of our deck is something that is actively designed to fuck Kinnan, though. Is the
Yep.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
so like I feel
We
like
play
I'm,
so much
totally
removal.
okay ruining Sisay and TNT and TNK's day if I have to go 1v1 with Kinnan in a deck that's built for it, right? I feel like we're more or less built to beat up on the Dork deck at this point.
I totally agree with that. That's intimate. There was never a point where I felt like I was scared of a Kennen.
Right. And I think we're gonna just get like our slots are getting better in that sense as we like slowly weed out the slightly less useful burn spells. Like people aren't running rending volley as much because there's just not as many blue white things we care about right now. And so as we kill as we no,
We'll see how that fairy does.
right we will maybe we'll bring it back to earth.
But realistically, like the other thing that I am going to be putting in my deck is Ghostfire Slice.
Yeah.
Because of how prominent Kinnan, Thrasios, Timna, blah blah blah, all are, and they're getting your commander out with these 3-drop commanders outside of situations where they're playing like Malcolm, or Magda, or maybe like Yisan type thing. It's just turned on.
Yep.
And it gets to go fuck your Seedborn Muse. And we don't have a lot of stuff that does that.
I mean, it also deals with Oppo. I mean, the thing is, like, in a situation where you have Oppo, they've probably burned a tutor to get it, which means their next priority is going to be card draw, which means one of their two mana, 2-color commanders are going to be in the field. So it is really on a lot of the times when there's Oppo on the field, and that's relevant.
Yeah.
I do think the cards like Untimely Justice are really important for saving Magda and also being able to get rid of the Cursed Totem in those situations where it does exist.
Yep.
Cursed Totem. Gross.
Malfunction.
What?
Untimely malfunction.
Untimely Malfunction.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that keep printing modal spells are
2 mana SWAT is just good.
Yeah, give us options. I like modal spells.
Yeah, no, yeah. We're getting like no downside modal spells these days. Like 2 options and
That's it. It's just 2 options.
2 options, split
Yeah,
second.
right?
They're both good. Like they power crept they're not power creeping, but like they're giving us side grades that are really attractive.
Another thing I was curious about, Julian, is you've been a supporter of Mishra's Workshop, specifically because it enabled so many of the hands that would fuck Rogsai. Now that you're off
Sure.
of
Yeah.
a lot of the stacks pieces, do you still hold that card in as high of a regard?
Um, it still just puts out some ridiculous hands. Um, I only saw it once this tournament, I think. Yeah, only once. It's like it's almost always like your second land
Right.
nowadays. Um, but it just I think it necessitates playing more effects that allow you to turn one Magda.
So like Rite of
Rite
Flame
of Flame, yeah.
and
Mhm.
Simian
Chrome
Spirit Guide.
probably. Yeah, Simian Spirit Guide.
Going all
You
in on
need
the
your Mox
turbo
Diamond.
stacks.
Yeah. So it like because it's really awkward if the card stops you from playing Magda effectively.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, that's like the number one annoyance of the card. Um, but so often it lets you just cast your 3 mana dwarves, cast your vehicles, cast your random 2 mana artifacts while still being able to use your red source to like play a dwarf. I think that comes up a decent amount. I don't think the card is as like necessary as I thought it was during like super Rogsai everywhere meta, but I don't think I'd cut it. But I also don't think like you have to run it. I think the card's like fine.
Yeah,
I am playing like a ton of mountains, so it's not as much of a risk in my deck.
That's fair. All right. Last question. I know, and I'm going to ask this to Julian specifically first because how do you feel about Magda's placement in the meta?
I don't like it. um, so like we've talked about this already, which is that like you have to be a really good politicker to be a good Magda player. But I think one of the reasons is because so many of the ways you get taken out of the game are ways you can't directly influence.
Sure.
So these are your bowmasters and the oppo, and oppo's like to a lower extent. It's mainly bowmasters and culling ritual. These two cards can single-handedly delete you from having any chance of winning.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Especially culling ritual. Oof.
Yes, especially culling ritual. And the only way to not get hit by these are if your opponents underestimate you, or if you can somehow politic them away from getting it.
Yep.
And I don't like being in that spot. I don't like my only answer to these cards being like talk no jutsu.
That's fair.
And it just puts me in an uncomfortable spot playing the deck. I'd rather have more options for dealing with it. Like, it's great when you can, like don't get me wrong, in every deck it is like an important skill to be able to talk no jutsu people from like tutoring certain cards to deal with you, or just cast counterspell with your words, that sort of thing. But when it's something you have to do, and like basically every game most of the time, eventually you're going to run into people that are stubborn, and no matter what you do, even if you're 100% correct, they're just getting bowmasters. You lose the game.
And then they lose the game, but you lost the game first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do you think the average pilot should shift to weaponize this positive placement, if or to compensate for the negative placement or negative position you think it had said?
I pretended to be a new player in round 1, and that's why I won it. I think you should do that.
So I'm playing Dwarf Tribal. I'm actually a high power player. What's a dockside?
Yeah. So I'll expand on this a little bit. Like, the way you carry yourself and your demeanor and everything, because this is a social game, matters a lot. Like reading your cards twice. You know, like, oh man, wait, does this do this? That sort of thing. Acting very unsure, like asking your opponents what you should do, right?
Getting free information because they want to make sure you don't punt.
Yeah, exactly. But also like putting off or like putting out the sentiment that like you're unsure of what you're doing will lead your opponents to, like, if not consciously, subconsciously, like not view you as much of a threat.
I play a lot of Secret Hitler, so
yeah. Exactly. So I think in order to be a successful Magda pilot, you need to just, your politics need to be extremely good, but also you need to really put off a demeanor of not being a threat, not knowing what your game plan is, being indecisive, and only when you can push for a win do you like
act decisively,
turn your brain on,
yeah,
and start playing super sharp in the eyes of your opponents.
Fair enough. I'm sure somebody's going to get something out of that. It's very good.
Yeah. What do you think, Chad? What are your thoughts?
Pretty opposite, but I have a weird philosophy on Magda. My philosophy is I think the better the deck better of a deck Magda is, the harder it is to do well with her, because she's extremely easy to shut down with well-timed removal. So the more people fear her while not knowing what she does, the more they over threat assess, the harder they're going to just like absolutely not even allow you to play the game with them.
Yep.
And I think Dockside getting banned, while it hurts us, I think it is a blessing in disguise, because now there's no longer are your tables sitting there thinking we can't leave Magda up because she might just play Dockside and win. Like
no,
that,
instead they just don't let you get the 5 treasures at all.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they're still going to try and not let you do that, but there are times where you might not have 0 treasures on board. You just got a Magda, but everybody's played artifacts. So like, well, if Magda just plays this Dockside, she's gonna win immediately. So
Right.
we're not, we're gonna preemptively. There's no longer that fear. Also, if you've got 5 treasures, and other people might have played a Dockside, they know you're just gonna go tutor the Curse Mirror,
Yep.
and copy theirs.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's a lot of benefit when Magda feels weaker or seems weaker in the meta, because people are going to underestimate it more, and that's when you're easier. It's much easier to get your little tricks in and be very sneaky.
I actually had a little bit of like internal conflict because I'm pretty active in a lot of communities, and I talk to people, and I try to popularize the deck like any good community organizer does. But during the banning conversations, me and Sho, 3 weeks before the bans, we weren't even talking about it in the context of the BNR. We had just decided, this deck would still slap really hard. We'd get like 6 slots, and the deck would still be, we'd probably actually get better because everyone else would slow down and not like revolve around it, and people would like play artifacts heads up and all that good stuff if Dockside got banned. And we knew when the bans happened, they're like, oh, we're better than fine. We're actually our stocks go up, and it was hard for me because I believe in the deck so much, and I love the deck, and I love talking about the deck. It was hard for me not to go everywhere and say, actually, Red's doing just fine, guys. So come over to the Dwarves. We'll show you what a docksideless pub stomping deck looks like. And so yeah, no, I think I think that people like me did not do us any favors in the
Yeah.
because I feel like we're in a I think we're in the Winota downswing right now a little bit. I think the average skill has gone. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, I think the deck's on a downswing, but not like towards a bad place, just towards probably where it should be, uh, because people are respecting it so much. But I think we have hit all the points I intended to, and much, much more. Congratulations again, guys. Thank you so much for giving me your entire night to wax poetic about this dwarf we all love.
No,
Hey
it was
man,
fun.
thank you for having me here.
Of
I
course.
didn't even realize that this Discord was so active, and I'm happy to have joined.
Yeah, we are very happy to have you.
Great to have you around. And
Yeah.
this talk was awesome.
Yep.
Agreed.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to end the recording here.